Morning. We're somewhere in that one spot. Fine.
Another month.
Another exciting, dynamic month in Trinidad.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, maybe it's.
Good.
So you're under no obligation. But I will not to do them. As a data research, but I will likely not take them with me. Good idea.
Recording in progress.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Trinidad Planning Commission for Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. This is a meeting that is being Zoomed as well as in person. First item on our agenda is the roll call.
Commissioner Slade,
I'm here.
Commissioner Cole,
Present.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Hopkins,
Here.
Commissioner Hakenin is recovering from surgeries. Not.
Wish him well. Okay, next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes from last month, March 15th. Are there any comments, clarifications, questions, et cetera, for the minutes from last month? Hearing none, do I get a motion to approve? Approve.
Second.
Moving second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
I
I will abstain as I was not here last month. Okay, next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. We have 3 items for discussion, public hearing, decision and action this evening. Any questions or suggested changes, et cetera, for the agenda? Hearing none? Motion?
Motion to approve as laid out. Second.
Okay, move and second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Agenda is approved as published. Okay, next item on our agenda are the items for discussion. And the first item is what is labeled Trinidad 2023-02, the grading permit and coastal development permit to replace the water mains and replace the redwood storage tank at the water tank location.
Just, we missed the items from the floor.
Oh, I am terribly sorry. It's right there in front of me too. I apologize. Any items from the floor? Here or via Zoom? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move on to our agenda items. And thank you very much. I appreciate that. The prompt, I missed that entirely.
You're falling out of practice.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah. Okay, so the first item, as I just mentioned, was the CDP and grading permit for the water work. And I'll turn it over to staff.
So this is the next step after the CEQA document that you guys reviewed at the last meeting. So this is the coastal development permit for the portions of the project within city limits, which includes the work on Edwards and Van Wyck, as well as the properties. Well, the city engineer is here to answer questions. So the project on Edwards and down from Edwards on Van Wyck down to 723 Van Wyck. So that's the house that's on the ocean side of Van Wyck. So between Edwards and there, a new main, they're going to replace the existing main there and add a new fire hydrant. And then lower down on Van Wyck, this across the slide, they will be removing the temporary water line that was placed above ground there. And then on Edwards, putting in a larger water main that will then serve where that Van Wyck line is. And then at the water tanks, it's going to be replacing all the 150,000 gallon redwood water tanks with a new 300 steel water tank. There are some improvements and clearing that will occur on those properties. The project also involves replacing water lines on the access road to the water tanks and on West Haven Drive, but that's not in city limits. So the county is also processing. And this project is a grading permit and coastal development permit. Staff report describes the project in a little more detail, and then you have the plans, the preliminary plans there for the portions of the project in city limits. The grading ordinance requires a grading permit to be approved by the planning commission, but certain findings have to be made by the city engineer. That the proposed grading will not adversely affect the drainage or lateral support of other properties in the area and will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare, and is not in conflict with city ordinances. So the project is designed by the city engineer's office and city engineer's findings. The project is located in areas that are questionably stable or adjacent areas that are known to be unstable, but the work is all taken right of way, replacing water lines. A geotech report was prepared for the tank. No wastewater is produced by the project. There will be some vegetation clearing. There is some sensitive habitat below Van Wyck, is not going to be affected by this project. But redwood, late cereal redwood forest around the storage tanks is considered a sensitive habitat. So redwood trees that are removed as part of that project need to be mitigated and replaced somewhere. The mitigation area I don't think is known quite yet, but they'll be working with other agencies. There's a Army Corps, a wetland filling permit that's also required, as well as a regional water quality control board permits are also required. So GHD is working on those permits. So the project can be found to meet the requirements of the city's local coastal program. The required findings can be met. So staff recommendation is for approval of the project. Conditions of approval include all the mitigation measures from the CEQA document. So those are incorporated as conditions of approval, as well as all the standards and requirements of the grading ordinance. And then all permits have to be obtained before work can start as well. So those are the conditions of approval. As usual, you have options. If you feel some of those findings can't be made, can add conditions of approval. You can request additional information, or deny the project if you feel that that's necessary. Happy to answer any questions or from myself, or Steve Allen is here as well as answers.
Thank you. Commissioners, may I make one suggestion? If there's comments on the staff report, by all means, we want to hear those. If there are questions, comments, or clarifications that we would like on the actual engineering documents, perhaps the easiest way to keep from having to flip back and forth a lot of times is maybe we'll just go through those page by page after we hear your initial comments on the staff report. And then we can just go through one time only for the engineering drawings with the city engineer if we have any questions on those. Is that acceptable?
I'm supposed to be on this meeting. I'm just going to listen in.
Questions, comments on the staff report?
I guess maybe this is a silly question, but the water tanks and that whole line going down to West Haven Drive is all within coastal zone, I guess, or well within the coastal zone.
Things are probably getting close to the boundary of the coastal zone, but yeah.
When will the redwood mitigation be figured out?
Do you have any more? It's going to be through the various permitting agencies, but do you have any additional information? The city's been talking about finding some areas for the redwood mitigation.
Yeah, it's a good question. Still going through the regulatory permit process, so we haven't received feedback from regulatory agencies. We just assume it would be mitigation. It's likely not to be part of the bid documents. It's probably not something we're going to have the contractor deal with, but the city would be responsible. So there's some time to work that out. It needs to be done as part of the project, but exactly where that will be or when it'll happen. Sure.
Great, thank you. I was curious also what's going to happen with all the redwood to the redwood tank that's being torn down.
So there's redwood from some redwood trees that are being removed, and there's also redwood from the redwood tanks themselves. So right now, the city had not expressed the desire to request or require that material from the contractor. So essentially, right now, the plan is to leave it up to the contractor, which should result in the lowest possible bid. So it's going to be up to the contractor whether they want to repurpose that or resell it, or in case of the tank specifically, some of the redwood's probably very usable and some is probably not. But to reuse it, it would take a lot of time and effort to carefully dismantle everything and reuse that, which costs more money. So again, we're not going to require the contractor to do one thing or another, but leave it up to the contractor what to do.
It's not just take off the rings, the metal rings, and then it all just comes apart.
That would be one option, yeah. Or remove the rings and then hopefully someone carefully take it down. But yeah, if they were going to salvage that redwood, that's probably the.
I just asked because last night we were talking about building benches and building signs and buying more wood. So or at least indirectly talking about that.
Yeah, steps to the beach. Excuse me, steps to the beach.
Step to the beach.
Good steps. That's for sure.
And so I also brought up that there's also redwood, some of the trees being taken down. So there are options of requiring or requesting some material. The trade-off, or just something to consider, is that the contractor needs to carefully dismantle the tank and provide some or all the wood, which could end up costing more money for the project. Or in case of the trees too, they could potentially leave some or all of the wood for the part to be milled or reused, but it will result in higher rates. So now there's no such requirement.
That's something that if we did want it, we could go ahead and get things started and then say that it might be contingent if we, or when could we decide? We have to decide that.
What do you mean? What happens with the redwood?
Yeah.
I guess I haven't thought about that question. I would kind of leave it up to the best judgment of project proponent.
Just throwing out questions.
Yeah, I mean, would it be possible to, well, specifically with the tank, to bid that job separately, just the tear down of the tank for, if that was like a way to, and bid it in the sense of like, instead of us paying someone to do it, somebody pays us to do it kind of thing.
There are options is the most direct answer to your question. So, I mean, it's even possible to leave the base bid, so to speak, open to basically contractor to do whatever they want. And then maybe there's an additive bid item or deductive bid item to specifically dismantle the tank and get rid of everything, I would assume, except for the redwood, whether that's all the redwood or some of the redwood, identifying where city property that would be stacked. But there are options beside the project.
And just one more question was, I mean, I see that there is going to be some sensors, but do you going to have real good sensors in there so that we can really understand where water's going and if we're going to be replacing all this stuff? Have you with that?
So I'm not sure the question exactly. Sensors for.
Oh, I was just seeing some sensors from mowing for houses that are just amazing, that so you can see how much water's flowing through pipes, and it's just, the technology is getting amazing. And I was wondering if you looked at that at all.
Yeah, we are going to include some new flow meters, basically sensors, so we can know how much water is flowing through the pipes, which are probably better than the current measurements. So that is part of the project.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I do have a question actually. How was the 300,000 gallon figure determined? Like how was it determined that was the appropriate size tank for that location?
That is a good question too. There was some previous studies done saying more storage would be ideal. 300,000 gallons to replace a single tank was probably the most reasonable, most feasible size that you could replace one tank. So rather than saying that's the complete amount of extra water that the city would need, it's not really the case, but it was really feasible to try to double the size of a single tank. Could it be a smaller tank? Yes. So was it a definitive else is saying absolutely 300,000? No, but more storage would be better. That seemed like a feasible approach.
Got it. So is that 300,000 gallon tank, is that like a relatively standard sized tank, or was there a specific tank designed for this site?
It's a fairly standard sized tank. Things can come in various sizes, but it wasn't a custom sized tank based on analysis. It was a reasonable size that could fit at the site, and that's a commonly available tank size.
I mean, I ask this series of questions because if there is going to be some disturbance of sensitive habitat, I would like to sort of maximize storage capacity and maximize overall resiliency to maximize the benefits of having disturbed that habitat. So I'm wondering, I'm thinking about calculating the volume of a cylinder, add a few inches onto the radius, and you can get a tremendous amount of water storage capacity out of that. So I'm wondering if indeed it's worth considering, or if it has been considered, just increasing the size of the tank relatively modestly to sort of maximize storage capacity if there is going to be this disturbance.
Yeah, it's good questions. The intent is in the long term, so we're trying to plan for the long term. So there's two regular tanks, both will likely need to be replaced at some point. So we're looking at replacing both tanks at some point. So whatever size tank is chosen now, currently 300,000 gallon tank, that's the same size that would likely replace the second redwood tank. So you're generally, we want the same type of tank and the same size of tank. So essentially, if the second tank is replaced with the 300,000 gallon, then we go from 300,000 gallons of storage to 600,000 gallons of storage. And so even when we're designing the site and looking at the layout that you have, we're basically looking at the second tank being utilized at the same size. That's why the existing tank that's before you is basically not right over the top of the existing tank. It's kind of pushed off to the side to leave room for the second tank to be fit on the site. That make sense?
Yeah, so my question is sort of related to that. Like if you increased the diameter at the base of, a foot, that's, a significant amount of additional water storage capacity with, in my mind, not a lot of additional disturbance required to do that. Why not do that? Is it a cost thing, or is it just sort of the way that you approach the general strategy for the water storage and resilience?
There's other issues such as required residence times and things for running the water system. So if we had, rather than saying arbitrarily like, well, what if we had 1 million gallons? It's like there's probably too much storage for usage of the size. So there's some practical limitations of meeting the state requirements for providing drinking water, how big of a tank we could have, and then not knowing how long it may be before the other tank needs to be replaced or the city may get grant funds. And we're also trying to put the new tank at basically the same elevation, bigger diameter, so that we don't have it being a lot higher. There's going to be some unused space at the very top that is going to be wider and taller than the other tank. But basically, the size that we're doing utilizes about 90% of the storage volume with the existing tank and the new tank, and then you get basically 100% of that volume when the second tank is replaced. So there's a few different jigsaw puzzles, if you will, pieces that we're
Yeah, I think I've finished asking a line of questions. I'm just, that's an interior diameter of 50 feet. I'm sorry, 50 feet, 1/16 inches. I mean, just relatively modest changes there seem to have tremendous effects on the overall storage capacity of this container. So it's multiplying it by the height of the tank, right? So I'd just like to add that, I'd like to see if there's going to be disturbances there. That's not just sort of plopping in a standard sized tank there, but we're really, plopping a tank which is maximizing on the available space and needs of the city, which, it sounds like it has been done, but.
I believe so. Part of that at this point, we're somewhat locked into the grant. So if we ask for money to build a 300,000 gallon tank, I don't think there's going to be extra budget to say we get 50,000 or something.
349,000 rounds down, right?
Your line of your questions are very valid, and I think we went through a lot of that. We also were looking at the property size as kind of the irregular piece. So in some ways, more stable would be wider, less tall, seismically. So we're trying to balance all those things, and also trying to utilize most of the space in the new tank, but knowing that the second existing tank is a lot smaller. So we're, I think, on the same page and trying to address those questions, whether or not we optimize it ideally. So you were
Gotcha. I would just, I'll shut up now, but I would just say that I would like that space to be optimized to the greatest extent possible, but might be completely out of our hands. So thanks for entertaining my questions as a non-engineer.
absolutely.
Yeah, I just had I didn't notice in the packet, but I guess this project is funded. We have the funding in place for it through some grant, it sounded like.
Right.
I just have a couple of comments. I'd just like to go back to the issue of the reclamation of the Redwood tank. I just went through this with my personal tankers, obviously a lot smaller, it's 12,000 gallons. But there is a significant amount of money involved in reclamation of redwood from tanks. So I don't know that we're the body that should make a recommendation, but somewhere I think in part of the bidding process, it should be very clear that whatever the contractor decides to do, that the city completely understands where that redwood is going to go. As an example, throughout names, but Almquist Lumber would take that in a heartbeat if it's still good. Most likely it is, and there can be a lot of money, and 4 or 5 figures perhaps. I would just like to have it on the record, if you will, that we should, as part of that bidding process, make it very clear as to the disposition of that redwood. The other thing I wanted to just ask about before we get into the drawings, and I will want to get into the drawings. See. So just so it's clear, the intent is a replacement of one tank at this point with a 300,000 gallon. For clarification, is the second tank, which will be replaced sometime in the future, will that also be a 300,000 gallon tank?
Yeah, that's the intent.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll go to page 11 of the staff report, which actually is page 6 of the staff report. Under slope stability, the comment there is made, work involves only replacement of existing water lines. These are the ones on Edwards and Van Wyck. And is in an area that has been subject of a number of recent geologic investigations. Are we confident that we have enough information to determine that this amount of soil disturbance is not going to create problems there? We've seen issues with Edwards, as we know, on the bluff side there along the parking spaces. So I realize it's kind of a general comment, but when we say in recent geologic investigations, are we confident that we have enough information to ensure that we're not going to do more harm than good?
I believe so, as the engineer standing compliance. So part of that reason, actually, I think would probably even be an improvement is I worry about the existing condition, that old EC, that pipe that's very brittle and prone to leakage. We have a lot of leakage in our system. So there, for all we know, there could be existing leak or leaks in that system. So adding water into the bluff is not a good idea in those locations. So just digging down 3 feet and pulling out an old line and putting in a new line, which is basically typically in a disturbed area, the subgrade of a road, I don't think would have any impact on the overall bluff stability, and likely would have a root conditions because it's going to be new C900 PVC pipe as opposed to very brittle AC pipe that, for all we know, could be leaking at the moment. Or if not, it's leaking right now. We have another earthquake or some other issue. It's very, very prone to leakage. And it's a leakage that I concern much more about than digging down 3 feet replacing water.
Refresh my memory, the water line is on the bluff side or the upside of Edwards?
On Edwards, it's on the uphill side.
Then I just have one last comment for clarification, and this is under the mitigation monitoring reporting program. There's a couple of acronyms that I didn't see anywhere. I'm on page 15 of the report at the bottom of the MM-Bio-2, two acronyms, PSB and ESA. Anybody know what they are? It's not.
If it comes like biological survey or study area, I would guess.
I'm sorry, it was what?
Probably study boundaries and biological survey
Areas?
Good.
Okay. All right, just want to make sure.
It was probably defined in the CEQA document. And
Yeah, I did a word search and I couldn't find anything. So, okay. Any other questions on the staff report? And as I said, there probably are a little bit of several clarifications that I'd like to get on the engineering drawings. What's on the staff report before we move to those?
Aaron had a few comments. I think they're not questions, so I think maybe saving them until you get to your more comment portion. I think I probably could have forwarded them to you without violating the Brown Act, but just to be safe, I figured I'd just read them to you. But I'll bring those up when we get.
Good.
Sorry. You say that the remediation of that 2,126 square feet of redwood forest woodland is already inherently a condition of approval, or it's something that we should add?
Yes, so it's in the mitigation monitoring and supporting program, so then it's been incorporated.
The cultural mitigation, I'm kind of surprised to see there's not more concern about digging.
I was sort of surprised too that we didn't, I mean, there was the AB 52 consultation on the CEQA document that was offered. I sent referrals and I sent public notices. So I guess they were satisfied with what they saw because we received no comments.
Just bring that up for the record also.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Last comments on the staff report. Okay, as I said, maybe the easiest thing to do is we just go through each of the sheets of the engineering drawings, draft engineering drawings, just to see if there's any questions or clarifications we have on those. So starting with sheet 1, G001, anything on that? It's pretty generic. Anything on G002? $101? Two. $103. 104. 117. 18. 501. 502. I have one question on 502. And again, this is just my lack of knowledge of how certain things are to be done. But I was somewhat surprised that not a lot, but the tank outlet piping is underground. And it just seemed to me from a maintenance standpoint, a reliability standpoint of having it underground, just I can't see it. So is that normal practice and that's acceptable, so to speak?
Yeah, most of the almost the entirety of the water distribution system is buried underground. So it's a very common way to have it. So at some point, obviously, you have to go above ground at the tank site. That's the current conditions, and that is the proposed conditions. So there's other challenges that you have above ground, whether it's freezing or being hit by a maintenance vehicle or animals or vandalism, or so in a lot of ways, it's much more protected underground. So it is a very common way to have the water infrastructure distribution system.
Okay. Along with that, and I'm not sure if it's on this sheet, it may not be, but there are a couple of statements regarding the possibility of a remote chlorinator, I guess is what you call them. But the statement was kind of may rather than will. So where do we stand with that, and why is there still some question as to whether or not that's required?
Good question. So we're still looking at that from a technical perspective and working with the operators. And so the chlorination is a requirement, and it's also kind of a complex process. So there's potential that we could add mixers to the new tank and make other changes rather than having to add more chlorine. So there's a benefit if you can add less chlorine, less potential for chlorine byproducts, et cetera. So while some chlorine is required, you don't want to add more than you need to. Some of the byproducts and issues with the current system is kind of on the physical setup and how things are plumbed, and there's dead spaces, so to speak, within the tank. It just means that there's not a good mixture of water. So adding some mixers and having the water come in one end of the tank and come out the other really encourages that flow of water. And so currently we're thinking that with those physical changes and the adding of a mixer that we may be able to not have to add a chlorinator. So we need to leave it as an option. We don't want to just add it. So we're trying to entire process, work with the operators, give them more operational control, In case they are having a problem, they have more options. And that's why it said may and not shall.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the clarification. See, we left off on, I think, what, 503 and 504. That's 001. 501. 502. And 503. I guess we don't have any questions on any of the drawings. All right. At this point, then I will open it for public comment. So anyone either in present here or via Zoom, if you have any questions or comments that you would like to make on this agenda item.
Hi, I'm Bryce Kenny. I've been on the water advisory committee for a couple of years, so I learned incredible things about water. I just wanted to touch on the one commissioner's question about the optimal size of the tank and so forth. I think this has been addressed by the engineer, but it was interesting to me to learn that you can't really store your way out of the problem because the water goes bad after a while. So it has to flow through the system pretty steadily and more. To throw that out there and sort of remains what you were talking about.
Yep. Yes.
My name is Anita Thompson, Trinidad. I had two clarifying questions. The fire hydrant replacement will be adjacent to 723 bandwidth, correct? To be replaced there, right? 720.
I believe so, down by the house on the seaward side.
Yeah. And so there's a fire hydrant currently it's located at 840 bandwidth, and it was replaced approximately 2 years ago, and is currently connected to the temporary water main. So when the permanent water main is installed, will it still be connected?
Yes.
Oh, all right. And then I have one more question. Well, it states in tonight's packet and supporting documentation, which by the way is very impressive, and interesting too. And just an aside, I'm just really happy to see that these important projects are going to happen really soon this summer, it sounds like. Anyway, it is stated about the city's aging water pipes. And there's a lot of issues with them besides the, I'm not going to read it to you, but besides the loss of water and also the pipes are undersized and other issues that could affect fire flows. So if that's part of the project, are we going to work on that in the future, or is that in the plan to work on that with this grant, replacing those pipes?
So again, there's a large part of the project is replacing and upsizing some of the water lines that are known to be past their useful life. But that it does not replace every pipe in the water distribution system. So the city's goal is to keep working on that problem and keep replacing. That's just all we can do in this particular area.
Well, they'll just be ongoing and.
Correct. That's
Okay.
the goal, is to replace all the aging.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comment here or in?
There's a question from someone on Zoom. Can I read it?
Sure. Yeah.
Has the geologic stability of the site been analyzed? 2 tanks might be better than 1 for redundancy and earthquake stability.
That's from Don Allen.
So the answer is yes, there was a geotechnical investigation done for the tank site. So there are existing 2 tanks there, and we are replacing one of the 2 tanks with the goal to eventually replace the other one with a larger tank. So we did do a geotechnical investigation to confirm that based on current building codes and current design standards that the site is stable. And then geotech report did confirm that and found the site suitable. So, I believe that answers the question.
Who was that comment from again?
John Allen.
Oh, Don. Okay. I didn't catch that. Yep. Any other public comment? Roll call. Go ahead, Sherry.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just had a question, and I'm sorry I'm catching up late on this conversation. But in the packet, I think it's on page 24, the packet that I've seen online. My question has to do with the removal of redwood trees. And there's several redwood trees that looks like they're going to be removed. Some of them are they're probably all second growth. But I was just wondering what the city has planned for using of those redwood trees. There's a 32-inch redwood tree. It looks like that's a pretty good size, 3 foot, almost 3 foot wide. So I was just wondering what the city has thought about with the use of those redwood trees. Thank you.
Yeah, good question, Jerry. I think we briefly touched on that before, but it was similar to the tank and talking with city staff and the city manager that at this point, the city wasn't making any requirements for what happens with those trees. Recognizing they could have certainly some commercial value, although if you're going to, try to log and sell them, then you have to go through a timber harvest plan, which is not the intent. But recognizing that there is value in those trees, and most contractors that I'm aware of would think about reusing those or doing something with them. But rather than requiring that they buck them up to 18-foot lengths or something that would be viable for milling, which is a potential for use for some of the city projects, those requirements typically add more costs to the project in order for them to do that carefully and deliver them wherever the city might want them delivered. So at this point, the plan is to let the contractor do with them as they wish, with the intent that basically that would provide the best and cheapest bid results for the city. And like any project, you have a certain amount of budget, and there's all kinds of things you would like to do with that money and different things. Certain additive bid items we would love to do to add more valving and things to the project than we currently have. So we're trying to really get the best bid value we could in the contractor to get the money to go further. So currently, as the design stands, we're not planning on requiring a contractor to do anything with the trees. They can do whatever they would like with them.
Okay, I'll just have a follow-up on that. It might be worth passing on to the contractor, whoever that might be, to think about contribution to native the tribal organizations that can build. We can work at SUMEG. There's lots of restoration of traditional villages and houses, plank houses, etc. So I know they're of value, but sometimes even parts of the trees can be used for benches around our ceremonial grounds, etc. So if there's if that would be kindly passed on to consider donating to the Yurok tribe or one of the tribes in the area, I think that would be noteworthy. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, any other public comment?
I just want to comment on the redwood trees and the tank redwood. Project looks interesting, but didn't the city do a cost benefit analysis about the wood and the trees to see what the potential cost would be to reduce the contractor's bid before they just said, "Oh, we think that's a great idea"? It seemed like they would look at the 32-inch tree, look at the amount of wood that's in the tank, and determine what the sale price would be, or if they want to donate it, or if they're going to knock off something off the bid, they would know what it would work. Thank you.
That was what my very inadequate comment was earlier, Kathy, is that there is a lot of value in both the living and the redwood tank. And somehow or another, we've got to account for that. Thank you. Good comment. Any further public comment? Hearing, seeing none, I'll bring it back then to the commissioners for any further comments, discussions, or if you would like to entertain a
I just want to make a quick, I think, clarifying points. Those tree sizes, those are diameters, right? That's
Correct.
they're not circumferences, they're diameters.
Correct.
And I'd like the mitigation for since the trees are going to be taken down, something else is going to happen somewhere else that we don't know yet. And it would be nice if that was done somewhere around town, or maybe with the tribes, or with, something good, but that's not been determined yet, right? So
It should be as close as possible. I mean, ideally, it would be on the tank property. Like if there's an area around on the tank properties that is more brushy or something, that would be ideal for mitigating the site. But you want to do it as close as possible, but I don't know if that's an option.
we feel that that maybe should be put into a condition of approval. We'll just leave it the way it's currently in the staff report.
yeah, that and along with the wood, what's going to happen, and then also the cultural with all the digging to make sure that's being taken care of. I realize that this thing needs to happen this summer, and I don't want to hang things up, but it'd be nice to at least have something tagged onto it so that everybody understands that it's happening and it's going to be done in the way that we want it to be done. I don't know how to do that.
I mean, so in the mitigation monitoring reporting plan is the cultural monitors, as well as inadvertent discovery protocols. So that's in there as a condition of approval already. And then the mitigation for the redwood trees is a little vague, but it's, there are some parameters on it in terms of satisfying regulatory agencies and permitting requirements. I think it's might be a little, we don't want to hamstring it too much, maybe with a condition of approval, but maybe some recommendations. Ways to just have it on record and make sure that the city engineer's office and city council are thinking about that.
We're certainly entertaining 2 recommendations then. Just so we're clear, a recommendation regarding the disposition of the trees, as possible use of them, as well as the tank lumber. And then a recommendation that the mitigation for replacement of the trees be done as close to the city as possible. Those 2 recommendations.
Or as close to the site as possible. Yeah.
Thank you. Close to the site as possible. Okay. Sound fair?
And then maybe this would be a good time to go over Aaron's comments. He had some recommendations. So he would request a condition of approval or ask about the possibility of that temporary storage locations have fencing that's screened versus open chain link fence. I believe we talked about this in the past, but as someone that looked through the fencing behind Murphy's for the duration of the stormwater project, a little screening or netting would lessen the visual impact for residents and visitors alike during construction. Construction always coincides with visitor season due to the weather, so it's worth asking about screening the staging area. Longer term, I think it'd be a good policy discussion going forward for projects in the city with temporary fencing. That's one comment. And then he just wants to make sure that all the contractors are talking and coordinating work, paving and striping with all the concurrent projects, so no work gets undone or done twice. Specifically thinking about the Edwards phase and the Hector Galindo area. Would hate for the crosswalk improvement, striping, paving to be undone for the water line replacement only to have afterwards. He says he's glad to see the chlorination booster system, which we talked about may not be required, but he learned at the water treatment plant tour for the water advisory committee that there's likely a need to chlorinate the water before distribution if it's stored after the plant, and initial chlorination takes place as chlorine levels drop. Three comments. I think one, I guess, question for Steve about the feasibility of screening construction staging area. This one's pretty spread out, so I don't know if staging area.
Yeah, it's a good question. So not the entire site wouldn't be fenced off with a cyclone fence, but I think the example is using like the staging yard behind Murphy's, especially something that's going to be there, long term over the summer, both from the residences and tourists and others driving by. So it's absolutely something we could require that they add that. It's just good to be aware that when we put conditions or require things in the specs, and the contractor will do them, and they add costs to do those things. So it's absolutely feasible. From my personal perspective, it's reasonable, and it's probably not that big of a price difference. Certainly something that could be added, but there is not an intent to put temporary fencing around every portion of the project, especially like, for instance, Edwards or Van Wyck, where you're trenching in the street, you'd have traffic control during the day, but then it would either be covered up, plated off. There's no need to really put temporary fencing. So I think that try to minimize temporary fencing, from my perspective, is usually preferred. If there is going to be a place like a staging area where you have fencing for weeks or months at a time, and then you have putting up some sort of visible barriers, it's feasible and could be done.
While you're there, Steve, is it the GHC going to be doing the project management? Who is going to be watching to see that everything's being done in a good timely manner? Is there dates on it? I mean, when this will be completed?
There are grant deadline dates. GHD will be involved in construction administration of it and on site. So yeah, we will be following up to see that whatever's in the contract documents is done. So that's part of the grant, is for us to see all the way through construction. That's a good comment. And always a valid comment, not the first time you've heard the comment, and hopefully never the last. So the last thing we want to do is be ripping up something that's done as part of another project. So it's a very valid comment. We try very hard to plan those out to where, if we're doing some underground work that's going to be done, if we're repaving street or striping that's going to happen later. Sometimes those things get a little jumbled up with grant deadlines and something gets delayed and it's just not feasible. But again, a very valid comment, something that we're always trying to address, make sure that happens.
Great, thank you. So, any other comments? I just want to clarify then, what I have heard has not necessarily risen to the level of adding a condition of approval or more recommendations. Is that correct? Do I hear that? Did I interpret that correct? But okay, so we have 3 conditions of approval, and there have been several recommendations made, none of which have necessarily been, this has to be a condition of approval. So I'm just clarifying that for everybody. Or do we want to make them conditions of approval?
I guess the one would be the screening of the staging area, which could be their recommendation or.
That's what I was trying to get some feedback as to which direction you wanted to go.
I think the screening can just be first and foremost, just minimize fencing, I think, and then secondarily screening. Those folks face the Murphy's mark. We can make that a recommendation.
This is going to go out to bid. So we could say that whoever does what we would like him to do will be a preferred bidder. It's not going to be just bottom line.
Well, that would be up to, the city, the bid process of the city that I'm not involved in that. It could be a recommendation to the council to consider.
I like the wood. I know that redwood of the water tower is going to be good. That could be used. That's good wood, and it should be considered as she says, that it should be a part of the bid. What's going to happen to that wood? Because the city's going to go out and buy new wood for something else, or they give it to the tribes as a token of good faith. It's something to be thinking about. How we can word that.
Just to try to address that, or at least explain the thought process, because I agree it should be thought of, and we have thought of it. So we didn't just randomly say, let's leave it up to the contractor. We know the wood is worth something. What we're grappling with is if we put conditions to say they either need to take all the trees, certain number of trees, if they need to buck up the wood, if they need to deliver logs, if they need to do something specific that typically adds to the bid price, and that's fine. We're struggling with having enough adequate budget to do all the things we want for the water system. So the reason that the decision so far has been made to leave it up to the contractor is not to say that we're not sure if there's any value in the wood. It's to help drive down the bid price, because I tried to say before, any contractor I know knows there's value in that wood, and they're going to try to find a way to benefit from that. And so if they can give us a lower bid price to the city to get as much, basically make the money go further for the water system, because they know that there's value there, then that provides, in my mind, value to the city. If there is an absolute desire to use some of that wood for any of the reasons for tribes, for the city, for anything, to me, that's also valid. It's just we need to recognize that if we put those conditions, say that they have to dismantle the water tank and deliver the wood to a certain spot, that demolition cost is absolutely going to be higher to the city. If that's worthwhile, that's fine. It's difficult to do a real, how much of a cost benefit analysis do we do? That's a good question. Our goal has been to deliver improvements to the water system. That's what the grant was for. And so I have a mill myself. I love milling wood. I know there's value in the wood. There's no doubt about it. But if our goal of the grant is to get as much bang for the buck for the water system, then we're saying, let's let the contractor get whatever benefit they want and try to put the money towards the water system. But it's
using every bit of money that we have, right?
And talking with Public Works today, there's additional things that they would love to do, additional valves and different things if we had extra money that they would love to incorporate, which I fully agree. So I absolutely agree. There's a lot of value in the wood. We're just trying to make the grant money for the water system go to the water system. But I'm not opposed to anyone else wanting to use the wood or using the wood. We just have to look at that and balance it out.
Does the city have a location where they could store a redwood water tank's worth of lumber?
When I asked Public Works that, they were shaking their head no. I mean, is there anywhere possible? I would like to think we could come up with something that it doesn't on the wood if we took it down and tried to pile it all up.
Get any estimation of, so there's definitely going to be some reclaimed lumber of some sort, right? But I mean, is it likely to be much debris, like wood that's theoretically of some value that just gets discarded in a project like this? There's gonna be some big, beautiful planks, right? They're obviously have some value, but will there be like scrap pieces here and there that might be able to be reused, some project of cultural value, for example?
I would say yes. I mean, Sherry brought up, it's not necessarily, the 32-inch biggest log, but it could be some of the branches, could be other things. And there's value in a lot of the things that are different amount of value to different people and depending on what's being used. So would there be any material that we potentially be discarded that is considered valuable? I have to say yes. I believe so. And it's just a matter of whether or not how much we try to reuse it. All for encouraging them to, Sherry, as you suggested, encouraging them to donate somewhat to the tribes or get more input on what would be beneficial. I mean, assuming a local contractor may get the work. A lot of the local contractors are very open to that. So I think there's definitely room for dialogue there. It's just a matter when you require it in the bid documents and you basically change the bid conditions and likely bid results.
Yeah, I just jotted down an incoherent statement here, a potential recommendation, something like, where possible, discarded lumber is not disposed of, but rather incorporated into the project's cultural value. It's like the valuable lumber can be used, however the contractor sees fit, but if there is sort of other pieces that would simply be discarded from the project, let's incorporate those into something like Sherry suggested, or other projects around town, benches and signage and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I would agree. And if it's first to kind of communicate and collaborate and let people know what's available. I mean, if it was something where, whether it was a city or the York tribe or some other entity, if the contractor said, hey, if you want to come, grab whatever you want over the weekend, or, there's logistics involved. I mean, potentially it seems like the intent of that could be met without putting an absolute bid requirement in the contract and actually driving up the price.
To get that intent, we just basically say as a recommendation, please try to do that. Try to use it, give it to tribal or cultural, or try to, you just word it, just try to be respectful, or
Yeah, let me try this. You're going to write the statement of work for the bid. So I think that maybe what we recommend tonight is this series of issues that we've raised that we would like to see addressed in the statement of work, in a sense that it will optimize the benefit to the city. And that can be done different ways by the contractor. So does that sound reasonable to put something like that, or request something like that in a statement of work for the bid? The RFP, I mean, is it an RFP?
It would be publicly bid, so there'd be essentially a request for bids. That'd be a public notice, and then the whole specification package would have a more robust statement of work.
Yeah.
I'd say the city and tribes, they're our neighbors. However, to do good things.
I think that's a reasonable recommendation without nitpicking what they actually do.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at.
As
Yeah. And as part of their proposal process, then they could come back and say, this is what we're going to do. So you then can use that as part of, are we bound by,
Public contract bid.
yeah.
We're basically taking the low bid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's hard to make it a condition to evaluate who you want to provide the project to, but nonetheless, you can still make it a requirement to have them explain what they plan to do with it.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Okay. All right. So we made essentially one recommendation to include a number of different things, which you captured.
Yeah, I think within the bid process, the statement about reusing the redwood and what they're going to do with it, minimize fencing and maximize screening. The third one is mitigating near the site, so that's really city.
Okay. That would have to be done within the city boundaries, I assume, right? Mitigation?
No, not necessarily, but as near to the site as possible, as feasible.
Any further discussion? Do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve using the 3 conditions listed in the packet and with the additional recommendations regarding the disposal of both the redwood tank and the live redwood trees be explained by the contractor and how they're going to dispose of that. And an additional recommendation that where fencing is put up, it additionally has screening on it. And the third recommendation, I believe that patient site was to the capture it.
Yes.
Thank you. Well done. You have a motion? Do I hear a second?
I will second that motion.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve. And others for your comments and for your insight. Really appreciate it. So, looking forward to having the streets torn up one more time sometime. Thanks. Okay, next item on the agenda is coastal development permit for emergency temporary closure of Parker Creek, Maxwell Lindgren Memorial Trails due to unsafe conditions and to protect sensitive environments. Yeah.
Yes, so a little bit of background. You're probably all aware that the large winter storms, particularly ones that were more western facing than our normal. There was damage to the coastline all up and down the coast. So there was some erosion on a number of Trinidad beaches, but in particular along Old Beach and the Trey study area. And so because of the erosion and damage to sensitive areas and to protect sensitive environments, the Tree Ancestral Society requested a meeting of the Tree management team in late February. I believe the dates are in here, February 10th. And the management team agreed to temporary closures of both the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail and the Parker Creek Trail in order to minimize people going down to the beach and disturbing these areas, and also due to the unsafe conditions on the trail. Certainly Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail, the bottom is totally washed out at this point. Parker Creek. So I issued an emergency CDP that was authorized in the city zoning ordinance, and then we have to follow it up with formal action with notification and public hearing, appeal period with the planning commission. So that's what this is. The management team has continued to meet, including today, actually. Especially our last couple of meetings, I think we're pretty productive in terms of, we're talking about both short-term, medium-term, and longer-term solutions to the issue. In the short term, it's probably some type of barrier along the base of the bluff. So that Parker Creek Trail can be open. The goal is to have that open by Memorial weekend. Axel Lindgren Trail will likely need to be closed a little bit longer. Traveling up and down at the base is causing additional damage down there. So we want to keep that from happening when we figure out some solutions to that. So at this point, what we're proposing, and the management team concurred today at our meeting today. The Coastal Commission they're not part of the management team, but they've been involved in the meetings. Alan, the city engineer, we've got Giovanni, a geologist from SHN, has also been involved. So we've got some professional staff. So the proposal at this point is following up on the emergency permit. Closure of the Parker Creek Trail for up to 2 months, but like I said, with the goal of getting that open by Memorial weekend, and then Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail closure for up to 6 months. So that would get us through the summer season, and hopefully the Ancestral Society has a grant that they're doing a study right now to look at the base of the trail and routing it to its traditional pathway and repairing the bottom. The Conservancy has also offered some money. The city has some trail maintenance money. So I think we're making progress. I think this is, and we have some steps that we can do in both like I said, the short term, longer term is harder. But to me, this is, I know, shades of Van Wyck trail closure. But I think this really is different. So if the closures need to be longer, then it will come back to the Planning Commission. I'm hoping actually to bring back some temporary, sort of the summer solution by May, the May meeting. Potentially that can be done through another emergency permit. But if we can, we're going to try and get something together in the next week so that we can put together something for the meeting in terms of some barriers around these places. So, this is the city's LCP that we have provisions for emergency CDPs. One thing we don't have is provisions for projects that are only CDPs. So we have findings for design review on CDP, use permit and CDP, variance in CDP, grading permit and CDP. But we don't have findings or provisions for something that just requires a CDP. And it's remember that our LCP was the first in the state to be certified. So it's lacking a few things. That's one of them. So basically, I just kind of looked through the LCP and the Coastal Act for applicable policies. I think we can find this to be consistent. Like I said, the Coastal Commission's involved. They're certainly concerned about public access, but also there's resources and environments that need to be protected as well. So that's our proposal at this time. I included a map. One of the things we actually talked about today is potentially another police signage or another barrier at the base of the Axel Memorial Trail to keep people from scrambling back up that way. But anyway, that'll come back to you in the future. And it's just the condition of approval is just that this will expire for the Parker Creek Trail after 2 months going into effect. So that would be after the 10 working day appeal period, and 6 months for that. Staff is recommending approval at this point, but I think we will see more in the near future.
Thank you. Questions, comments for the staff report?
Yeah, so following the various meetings that the management team has had, I guess, without obviously giving away any confidential cultural information, I guess I'm curious what the specific concerns are of keeping the trails open to the cultural resources.
So it's just, a lot of people down on the beach, people are curious, they go exploring along the edge, so there's just more potential for damage to the base of the bluff and more potential for finding they're exposed.
And that's different than however long.
Not necessarily. There have been, erosion. Erosion down there tends to be somewhat episodic, and so this was definitely, a 30-year, 40-year kind of storm event. The last one like it was 82, 83. But there is, kind of ongoing erosion at the toe of that slope. And so it's definitely an ongoing issue, but I think this is it was so much erosion that it just, wiped out the vegetation at the base. And so it's just, everything's just more obvious and exposed.
Yeah, I mean the base of Axel Lindgren Trail has been pretty hairy for some years, and it certainly is worse now. But I mean, it's been a scramble. That the wooden structure that's there. I mean, it's all screwed up now. It's been screwed up since before these storms. And I guess with regard to the erosion, I mean, isn't that whole hillside a landslide that's just slowly inching its way into?
There are several landslides, yeah. I went down to the site with Giovanni and Steve and Eli, and you can see like the slide below where the lighthouse was. That material has kind of moved out further onto the beach. So and there are new cracks up at the top. So it's a natural process. It's exacerbated by man-made activities. There's no easy long-term solution for this. But right now we're kind of focusing on what are we going to do about it this summer.
Other comments, questions?
I'm curious to hear what other people are saying first.
Well, yeah, I guess just following up on that. I mean, from the discussion that I've heard at this last 2 city council meetings and at the Trails Committee last night, I feel like there's a lot of discussion about this erosion that's happening down there. And I feel like that's been sort of framed as like this bad thing that we need to try and prevent. And there's talk about trying to minimize erosion and how we can engineer our way out of this. But I mean, in my professional opinion, that erosion that's occurring down there is a naturally occurring process. And I don't think it's something that we should be fighting. And I think that trail is just going to periodically erode out, and we need to just learn to live with that and not try to engineer our way out of it. Like it's just something that we're going to have to maintain into perpetuity if we want to keep that trail there.
I think, that is a logical conclusion, and maybe that's in the end, we have to face that fact and then how to manage things as erosion occurs. I don't know. I will say that some of these issues were brought up in the Tri Management Plan, and there were recommendations to do some of these things a number of years ago. It was recognized that the base of the trail washes out and needs periodic repairs. And it's been something that the city hasn't kept up on. The hope is that if the trail is rerouted to its more traditional path, it would be more stable. And that's kind of what they're looking at right now. I think we need time to kind of work that out and figure out how to manage this in the interim while we look at long-term solutions. And I don't know. It's the long-term solution is hard armoring, and that's not necessarily a solution. So, and it's got a barge. It's a challenging site, and there's a lot of things to think about. And so again, this is sort of the short term. Then I think there's also going to be some interim, trying to get the base of the Axel Lindgren Trail repaired, and get that back open again. In terms of keeping people away from the base of the bluff, I don't know what we would do in the interim, but it's definitely different timescales. It's complex.
I guess my other thought on that is in terms of keeping people away from the base of the bluff is that the beach is public and you can access it other ways than these 2 trails. So closing the trails doesn't keep people away from the base of the bluff. Well,
that's one of the things that's recognized, and that's why we're looking for some sort of barrier to keep people away from the base of the bluff. Within the sensitive areas. So, and kind of that Axel Lindgren Trail is kind of the heart of that, and so that's one reason to keep that one closed a little bit longer term. Parker Creek is further away, but no, it's recognized that people are going to go to the beach anyway. regardless of whether the trails are closed. So the solution we're looking at is, again, some sort of barrier along the base of the bluff to keep people away so that we can at least open the Parker Creek Trail.
Perhaps it was soft engineering, like just cutting stuff to keep people out and trees or something.
Well, that was, we liked that idea when we were on site, but Kelly and Sarah said they've seen, because we thought willow stakes would be a good way to kind of create a barrier, both visual and physical. But they said they've seen the willows get shaken in the wave action and actually did contribute to erosion. So I think that's a little bit more.
I was curious if is the city liable if somebody goes down that trail? I don't think there is. I don't think
There are some there's a state code, maybe Bryce is familiar with it, but there is something that limits liability on public trails.
so. The insurance, we're not going to let insurance stop something from happening in this case.
Well, I mean,
That's true.
it was the insurance that recommended closure of the Van Wyck Trail, and I'm not sure what the difference was there. I mean, certainly someone can sue the city regardless of what the law says, and then it might get thrown out, but it's still, the city still has to defend itself and go through that process.
I heard that whole argument and I don't like it. I don't like an insurance company saying that can or can't do something. And so anyway, that's one thing. I don't like it being closed. But if the management team is on board and everything's working towards something, then, but I'm not going to, I just don't like seeing it be closed. I walked it today and I didn't see the problems. And the axle trail is definitely worse. And, but it was closed on February 10th or something and nothing's been done.
But
Signs.
I mean, part of it, we had a couple of meetings and then we kind of got a larger group together. And so to wrangle, I don't know, I think we had 16 people in our meeting today. To, wrangle that many people, 3 people from the Coastal Commission, 3 people from the Yurok tribe, Sarah and Kelly from the Ancestral Society, several city staff. So to get representatives for everybody at a meeting like that scheduling has been a little bit tough, but now we're more in a pattern of weekly meetings. So I think we're making some progress.
Just, I'm going to follow up on Tristan's comment. So I guess it's a little confusing to me as to who is accountable for remedying this issue. I mean, our job tonight is to decide whether or not we agree with the CDP as proposed, which is to temporarily close. So that to me is, cut and dry, yes or no. But then I guess as a kind of a moving on beyond that, who's accountable? Who believes that they're the organization or the person who is responsible for implementing this?
I think, at this point, both the Ancestral Society and the city have taken some responsibility for moving things forward.
So you don't see the management team as the leader. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious more than anything else.
The management team is, kind of the body that is intended to be making recommendations regarding the 12.5 acres.
Correct.
So in that sense, but they're they're not their decisions or recommendations are not binding, and I'm not normally involved in management team meetings, but I don't, from what I understand, they don't actually vote. It's more of a consensus, and certainly, these are issues that affect the 12 and a half acres, the Tri-State area. But there are also issues that affect the community.
No, I completely understand. I just was curious from your standpoint.
I would say in terms of jurisdiction, it's the city
Well,
is the primary.
Yeah. Okay. I have one question on your little map here. And it wasn't clear to me, there's a section which is X'd out with red X's. And I think I understand where the closure signs are, but I didn't understand those. What is that?
So it's because I was looking at this map after having recently walked the Parker Creek Trail, and I think it's wrong.
Oh, that was your comment. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, so the X's, and then it didn't come out very well, but if you can see between this orange gate and that orange gate, I added a trail. So I think the trail actually goes straight down from Wagner there. And then, this is growth lane this whole way, which, the
Right.
trail doesn't cross the creek until it gets.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other comments for staff?
Yeah, I guess following up on your trying to keep us on task. I think we're trying to decide whether or not to keep trails closed. And I think given what I've seen since the trails have been closed, it's difficult for me to get on board with an extended closure, given the lack of action that's happened past 3. And I guess I would just hate to see us keep these trails closed for 2 months, six months, and nothing happen for the next 6 months. Nothing to continue to happen. At that point, we might have to just keep it.
It's, I guess a related, unsurprisingly, question or concern. So February 10th was when
Yes.
Yes, that was 68 days ago, right? And now we're talking about extending the closure 2 months for the Parker Creek Trail, 6 months for Axel and Groom. I've not been involved in the meetings about these ongoing closures, but is there optimism about what can realistically be achieved in 2 months or 6 months?
Yes. I think I don't know about Axel Lindgren. I think that, in terms of the management team, it's recognized that we want that to stay closed for the summer because we're, that with the erosion, it's kind of leading people into the more sensitive areas. People are scrambling around and, kind of the heart of the study area. And we're going to look at putting more permanent temporary barriers on that trail. That trail is designated as the primary trail to Old Home Beach through the settlement agreement. So, it's not something the city can just leave closed. But I think there's more issues around that one. I think Parker Creek is I think the city council has made clear, and I think the management team recognizes and supports the idea of getting that open. I think, like I said, there was about 6 weeks where we didn't meet. And that I think really set us back between people being sick. So I think we canceled 2 meetings because key people were sick. But now we're on a weekly meeting schedule, and I am seeing.
It was a tough March. We had a lot of rain.
I mean, what it comes down to, right, is that I think that's every day of closure is in reality more disturbance of sensitive areas. Like there's just thinking about the local trails to the beaches, whether it's the trail down to Trinidad State Beach or College Cove, or until very recently down to Humboldt. It's also status quo, but there's, you know, these washed out trails because, of course, coastal erosion and way back then are ongoing and always will be, and that things like that are going to get worse, right? So it's not to both the Humboldt County locals, I suppose, and also to visitors, like traversing washed out trails isn't necessarily new. Traversing washed out trails isn't necessarily a new or unusual thing. But walking off those trails is, I think that's causing quite a bit of damage, whether it's social trails or trampling on sensitive vegetation or sensitive cultural areas. So, I mean, I don't think it's quite as cut and dry as do we open and close the trail. I think it requires an acknowledgement that every day that the trail remains closed, there is irreversible damage occurring to areas that weren't previously allocated as trail. Oh, that's news to anybody in the room, I guess, but it's worth keeping in mind, I think.
Any other comments for staff before we open it for public comment? Okay, at this time, I'll open it up for public comment. And yes, please come to the microphone. And
thank you. And I apologize. I was rushing from another meeting, so I didn't have time to make any notes. But I've lived here now for 12 years.
could you state your name, please?
Jim Needham. I'm on the Trails Committee, which we like to call it the Trails Abandonment Committee. The Parker Street Trail is in no worse condition than it has been in the last 12 years. It's in good condition. That beach is the beach that is primarily used by children. It's much safer than Trinidad Beach. I mean, it is. Anybody who goes down there knows it's not nearly the way back then. You know, if you close that, you're prohibiting little kids from being able to go to the beach in a safe condition. And they can go to the other beach, but there's a lot more wave activity there, and it's a lot more dangerous. So leaving that aside, because we now know, and I think we can show pictures, that that's not a question of the condition of the Parker Street Trail. Then what's the other argument? That the little kids or somebody down there is causing erosion? Respectfully, that whole hillside is moving. You could put 1,000 people down there with shovels tomorrow, and they would have no more impact on it than one day of waves. It's just physically impossible for them to do so. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of tons of dirt that they would have to move. Just physically impossible. So then what is the reason somebody wants to close Parker Street? I don't know. I asked if I could attend to today's Shoreline Management Council meeting and was told that it was a confidential meeting or a private meeting. So I don't know what went on there. I do know that the Shoreline Management Plan has been in effect for 17 years. 17 years. 17 years ago, the Shoreline Management team said that Parker Street was actually supposed to be improved so that you can actually have disability, the disabled go down the trail. That's never happened. 17 years ago, so there's just no reason to close Parker Street. Absolutely none. Now, as to Axel Lindgren, I agree that the bottom portion of that is dangerous. It has been eroded significantly. But I would also note that 17 years ago, it was also dangerous. And they comment about that in the Shoreline Management Plan that they adopted back then and said that it was supposed to be improved, that the city of Trinidad was supposed to make the improvements. Or alternatively, deed it over to the UROC and they would make the improvement. So it's the city's responsibility. I agree that Parker Street probably needs to be closed right now. I mean, not Parker Street. Axel Lindgren needs to be closed right now. But actually, somebody needs to take the bull by the horns and get that thing fixed. thinking that the shoreline management team is going to do it, respectfully, every time, it's just not going to happen, period. I mean, if somebody's willing to bet me $100 to a donut hole, I'll take it any time. Because it's just, it's just like trying to push a cat out from under a porch with a rope. Just can't do it. So that's really my response. I really hope that you would not close Parker Street. It really needs to be kept available for the community.
Walk up to the mic. I appreciate that public comment, obviously, and I should have mentioned beforehand that we would like to limit the public comment to a reasonable amount of time.
There's also a hand up on Zoom as well, just FYI.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Don's there too. Okay.
Don can go. Go ahead, Don.
I can't hear
Hi,
Don, there you go.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. Steve Madrone and I did a trail feasibility analysis across the Trinidad Bluffs back in 1994, as prompted by the lawsuit against John Frame against the city. And, we deferred to the Churay Ancestral Society because according to Axel Lindgren at the time, that was the traditional location. They called it the Hogback Trail, the one that went down from Memorial Lighthouse to the beach. Steve and I looked at 3 potential locations, and I think our preferred one was actually to the west, and it would basically intersect at Edward Street and Van Wyck Avenue, and then go at a gentle angle, zigzagging down the slope. At the time, we were told that the wetland impacts were too severe. I think that should be revisited. The Axel Lindgren Trail was also very poorly built. The steps weren't an even cadence, and that's kind of a no-no if you're building steps, if you're a carpenter. My last comment is that if you have to close the trail, please don't close them both at once, because as a previous comment was made, we would be excluding everybody from Old Home Beach, and that is probably the most desirable beach in terms of protected shores and out of the wind and all that kind of stuff. So I would hope that only one trail at a time is closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Kathleen?
Lake, and so I'm all about coastal access. I've been a part of the Trinidad Land Trust in the past. We've advocated for coastal access. I don't understand the reason to close either one of the trails. There's trails all up and down the coast of California that are public access. They're in much worse shape than either one of these trails. I don't have the shoreline management plan map in front of me, so that was not provided to the public, but I don't think either one of the trails are within the shoreline management plan. I'm wrong? Mm-hmm. No, from the information that was provided in the packet, there's no pictures of this damage. I've lived in town for 25 years. I don't see that the damage is any different than any other year. So I would like to see pictures of the problem. I have concerns that are being discussed about more potential people. These are public beaches. They're sensitive areas. I can't imagine putting up barriers. I'd like to see a picture of what those would look like if that's going to be on the table tonight. Leaving the trails open if you want to sign them, they have roots or they are difficult to get down. That's what state parks do. I just took a trip down to the beach, all the way down the coast of California. Lots of damage. I was in Santa Cruz, Capitola, Monterey, Pacific Road, all the way down to Lagoon Beach, Preview Beach. Lots of damage all over. Lots of sensitive places. Lots of tribal entities. All the beaches are open. Thank you. Thanks, Anita Thompson. So, okay, so please reopen Parker Creek Trail and access to Old Palm Beach immediately. I request that an extension not be granted based on several factors. I attended last night's Trails Committee meeting. There was a lengthy discussion regarding the temporary closures of Parker Creek Trail, Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail, and Old Palm Beach. During that discussion, some important information and Trail Beach closure concerns were shared. For example, even though there has been ongoing closed session meetings and studies conducted, no physical work has been done. There has not been any progress made in regards to repairs or an alternative access to Old Palm Beach. Parker Creek Trail should be open now with access to Old Palm Beach. Work can be performed while the Parker Creek Trail and beach are open. As stated in public comments during the last two city council meetings and at last night's Trails Committee meeting, Parker Creek Trail should be open immediately. People stated at the city council meetings and at the Trails meeting, and I agree that Parker Creek Trail is in good condition and is an easy trail to use, and access to Old Palm Beach from Parker Creek Trail is not as difficult to access as many other trails when it comes to beach access. However, these trails, for example, at Trinidad State Beach, remain open and used on a daily basis. The Parker Creek Trail and access to Old Palm Beach was closed on February 10th. It is April 19th and no work has begun on Old Palm Beach, Parker Creek Trail, or Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail. In the city of Trinidad, we currently have 3 trails closed with no access to one of our beaches, and a request has been made to close the Lindo Trail. I find this both upsetting and hard to believe. An additional note, at last night's Trails meeting and at a prior city council meeting, the city manager stated that he could schedule an open meeting with the Chirai management team so interested community members can be a part of the discussion regarding the process and work necessary for the Parker Creek Trail, Axel Lindgren Trail, and Old Palm Beach. Since the trail and beach closures there have been several meetings with the Chirai management team, 2 in February, none in March, a meeting last week and one earlier today. However, these meetings are closed as been stated. The public cannot attend and minutes are not taken. I'm interested, as well as others, in attending future open meetings with the management team. Hopefully, an open meeting will be scheduled next month. And I'll follow up with asking the city manager for that. And then finally, the target date to open Parker Creek Trail and Old Palm Beach is Memorial Weekend, which is next month. So the big question is if we did do an extension, which I hope we don't do, but if we did, if the work it still isn't performed by then, are we going to open the trail, Parker Creek Trail and Old Palm Beach, or will you just keep it closed? Thank you very much.
Yep. Any further public comment, either here or via Zoom? Don, another comment, real fast.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that one of the things that we recommended in that feasibility study too was that the best way to stabilize that slope would be from a barge from the ocean, bringing in large riprap. Otherwise, I don't think you're ever going to stabilize that slope below the old village site. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have some written material I'd like to submit, and I will be happy to pass these out to the commissioners, or I can have the clerk do it, whatever your pleasure is. I think it'd be quicker if I just,
Since you have it in there.
I got them right here. Here's a copy so everyone can have one. I'll try to do. I go through these quickly together. Before, my name is Bryce Candy, city of Trinidad since about 1980. Frequent user of all the trails, been here, even though I'm 67 years. Okay. So this picture number one is the bottom of the Parker Creek Trail. That was taken today, so that's the current condition of it. I'm looking back up. And apparently, part of the plan is to maybe remove this heavy log that's up there. You can see the picture. I think that's a great idea because that's a really big log and it's a lot of weight right there on the bottom of the trail. But that, that's a couple of days' work, maybe at the most, guy with a chainsaw or something. Number two is also at Old Home Beach, and it shows the remains of previous efforts to armor the bluff down there, which never works. You can't stop the ocean. The power of the ocean is very powerful. And you end up with these, a hazardous situation of, remains of what is put there to try to stop the ocean. Number three is another view of those baskets of rocks that are closer up to the edge of the bluff there. And you can see the wire and everything. And it's really kind of a hazard, especially, the kids, like was mentioned, this is a favorite children's beach. This is the kind of stuff you end up with when you try to armor the beach the wrong way. Number four is the bottom of the actual landing trail. It is in very bad condition, but really it's the only cultural trail apparently between the two. The Parker Creek Trail is just a legal public access trail, has no real cultural significance. So that's important to keep in mind. That was mentioned, Axel Winger Trail has been in very bad shape for a long, long time. Number five is right over here at the state park at the bottom, the north end of State Beach. And you can see a very recent major slump, lost a lot of dirt in that trail. So you have to walk just over there on the edge, the edge of the photo, you can see that. But the state park is not closing the trail. Users are expected to keep their eyes open. And if they're not comfortable walking on the trail, turn around and go back. You assume the risk when you walk down a trail. And that's reflected, there's another view of the bottom, that same trail. Those were all taken today, so those are current condition. And certainly you can see these are in much worse condition than the Parker Creek Trail, the bottom. Picture number one. And at number 7 is a copy for you of section 831.4 of the California Government Code. Commissioner Hopkins was asking about the question of liability. Well, there is in black and white for you. I think the city attorney would disagree with me, and I do happen to be an attorney myself. It would be my opinion that the city is completely free of liability for the Parker Creek Trail. Number 8 is an excerpt from the Shoreline Management Plan. That's the cover page. From the descriptions of what the original village was like down there, the sweat house, the brush dance pit, water hole, graves and trails. So everybody knows that there's cultural resources down there. There's entirely too much secrecy around this whole thing of the management team and, unless there is some specific, location of a certain grave or something, fine, but it should be a much more open process because it's common knowledge that was a major cultural village site. Page 10 talks about, and this is from the management plan, talks about how it's not feasible to stabilize the slope with riprap because of the cost and the unsightly nature of those kind of things. So, but fortunately for you guys, there's a win-win outcome here tonight. And that is simply to, put a condition on your motion to approve that the Parker Creek Trail can only be closed for 5 consecutive work days. Closed when the work is actually being done. Rest of the time, it has to be open like a regular trail, like it has been since 1978. And if the management team wants to put up a fence or something along the bottom of the bluff, that can be done. People can still use the beach in the meantime. And I don't think people are going to be interested in trying to go up there and dig around in the banks. Everybody knows that's illegal. I never see anybody doing that down there. And it's just very unlikely to happen. Temporary closure, but the Van Wyck Trail, they came in here and got a 6-month CDP for a 6-month temporary closure. And that was 2 years, 8 months ago. Still closed today. And the actual closure got 4 years coming up this July. So when people say, oh, don't worry, it's only a temporary closure, that scares the heck out of me because of this precedent we have, temporary closure. But you've got a good solution to the problem tonight, and I really hope you stick up for the people's constitutional right to access their beaches and give us something to protect the resources and get people work.
Other public comment here or there? All right, Sherry, yes.
Thank you. Made it back to the house. I totally hear, I think we all hear the comments from our community, and we all understand the issues as eloquently put out by a lot of the folks today. Being on the shoreline management team as part of the Yurok tribe representative, it has been important to look at how we can open those trails up safely and as soon as possible. And I think the consensus here with listening to everyone is let's figure out how to open up the Parker Creek Trail right away. And that's why we, Trinidad management team today, offered to get it open no later than Memorial Weekend. Hopefully it could be sooner than that, but that would be the utmost time frame. I'm not sure, and this is where Becky can help or other people can help as far as what actually needs to be done at the site that we're talking about. And I think that that's where there's some decision points that need to be made is what actually do we want to do? The toe of the Axel Lindgren Trail definitely needs to be closed. So how do we do that? What do we do that? What does that look like? So those are the things that they're going to discuss the next time they meet, and they've made a commitment to meet weekly. But I think we all agree that the Parker Creek Trail should be open sooner than later. And how can we open that sooner than later? There's a lot more need to think about the Axel Lindgren Trail. As many of you said, it's been this condition of trying to repair it, and it keeps failing and repairing, keeps failing. And I'm not sure what the long-term situation is for that. But certainly, having the Parker Creek Trail open, I think would help the community, would help the visitors, would, kind of look, we're trying to figure out resolution to this situation. So I just wanted to say that it's not that they're not listening, people aren't listening, people aren't trying to focus on that, but we also want to make sure that we're doing it right if we can. And I appreciate the city really taking time to listen to the engineers, taking time to get Coastal Commission, Coastal Conservancy, all the different people involved in this so that we can make sure it's being done appropriately and efficiently. We don't want to be wasting people's time and money if it's not going to work. So I think those are my comments right now. Appreciate the city taking a look at this issue and trying to figure out, what's the best way forward.
Good. Further comment, public comment. Right, hearing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any additional questions or comments that you would like to make, or we need to make a decision here? I will ask one question to kick it off. Let's see, what happens? So you issued a CDP on February 10th. I believe that is valid for 30 days.
It's not clear. It's with a lot of things in our ordinance. What it says is within 30 days of the emergency permit being issued, a complete application has to be submitted. Well, this isn't really so I mean, I suppose we could have sat on that indefinitely, but I felt that we needed to get this.
No, I appreciate that. So then the follow-up would be, and pardon me for saying black and white, yes or no. I obviously was not thinking this through. But what happens if, hypothetically, we were to not agree to this tonight? Does that mean then that the trails both become open?
Well, there's an appeal period.
Of course.
And I imagine it would be appealed to the city council.
Are the trails not currently open, given that
That's correct, they are not.
even though it's past this 2 months of the emergency?
Yes. So
I didn't hear what you said. It would be appealed to the
city council. I guess.
Yeah, I know the signs are still up, but
Technically, yes. Like I said, it was only 30 days for an application to be submitted. This isn't the type of project where it's a city project and need an application. I wanted to bring this to you in March, but I was hoping we'd have, more of a plan for the future. I guess this has been, been a difficult process, but there's a long history here, and I would say that, without, I don't think this is giving anything, like Bryce said, the fact that this is a culturally important area is publicly known, so I don't think I'm giving anything away to say this, but the primary reason for the closure is to protect cultural resources, not because of the condition of the tree. And, the fact that this situation has been going for a long time, I think is, one of the big frustrations of the Ancestral Society, and that this wasn't dealt with 15, 17 years ago when we managed. So to say that, it's been like this for so long, why does it matter? I think that, recognizing that there's a problem, taking some action, I don't know what the eventual outcome is going to be. But like I said, this isn't the Van Wyck situation. The things, there were a couple of comments that nothing's been done in the last 2 months. To do anything down here, I mean, like a long-term solution, we're talking like 10 years, to go through 5 to 10 years to go through an environmental review and permitting process. So to do anything in an area like this takes time. So right now we're looking at like, what is the minimum we can do and get permitted in a short and constructed in a short amount of time? Give us some time to look at more permanent solutions.
Hi, Trevor. Sorry to interrupt, but this is Sarah from the Cherai Ancestral Society. Would it be helpful to, I mean, I'm willing to do it, to report out some of the things that we've been doing in the Cherai management team and where we're at. I'm joining in late, so I apologize for that. I had some things going on here, but would it be helpful to report kind of where we are with the short-term goals and what we're looking at doing right now?
Sure. I haven't been sure about how much to say. I did talk about, putting a little bit more temporary or a little bit more permanent temporary fencing on the Axel Lindgren Trail, and then putting some sort of barrier at the base of the slope. And that's basically what I said. So you have anything
Okay.
to add, please?
Yeah, so the Cherai management team has been meeting regularly to address this issue, and it was the Cherai management team's recommendation to close the two trails to protect the bluff that is currently failing. And so the reason for the emergency closure is because we were alerted by private citizens that were concerned about the conditions. And so, meeting with an emergency management team meeting and working through the management team's process, that's what the city agreed to do when they signed on and helped us develop the Cherai management plan, right? So the plan outlines the job of the management team is to implement projects. And also in that plan, it talks about the ability to close the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail once a year if needed. The closure for the trails, we don't want to be permanent. We've fought, for a long time in order to even install that trail. That trail is there because of our advocacy and because of our hard work along with the Yurok tribe. So our goal is not to close the Memorial Trail long term, just enough for the management team to be able to do its job and to figure out short-term solutions to protect the slope while we work on the long-term solution. Like Trevor said, those solutions are like 5-10 years, in the making. We do have a grant that we got from the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples that we being the Cherai Ancestral Society, that we are currently working on. That's a conceptual plan to rebuild and redesign the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail. So we're actively working on that. And then, this other emergency popped up, and the best way to protect it was to close both the trails. We want those trails to be open, but we want to do it in a way that's safe. And so right now we're meeting weekly as the Cherai management team, and all we're asking is for enough time to be able to do this in a thoughtful way so that, so that we're able to open it in a good way and not open ourselves up for liability or anything like that because of that slope instability and because of the damage that it's causing. Are there any questions that you have about the process of the management team or for the Cherai Ancestral Society that maybe I could answer?
Yeah, this is Tristan here. From what you just said, it sounds like you're primarily concerned with the stability of the bluff more than any particular cultural resource.
So talking about cultural resources in an open meeting is not, there's legal protections around that. So that's not something that I'm willing to discuss here tonight, but I understand why you're bringing it up. but yeah, there's laws about that. Unfortunately, we can't discuss it in an open meeting. So I apologize for not being able to talk about that further.
I understand that, I guess, but vaguely speaking, is it the cultural resource that you're concerned about, or is it the flood that you're concerned about? Or are those the same?
So we're concerned about the bluff instability. So, the Churai study area is the nucleus of the Churai village, right? And so that area is a sacred site. There's bluff instability that is causing damage and is creating harm within that nucleus of the village. And so we're just asking for time through this emergency CDP. We're asking for time to be able to allow the management team to do its job and to implement those ideas that have been brought forward, like in the LACO report, out of the management plan. None of this stuff is necessarily like a new concern, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't create damage every time it happens, right? And so, it's talked about in the management plan. So if we want to talk about like the management plan, but I cannot talk about cultural resources, and that is protected by law. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other further, let's see, did I bring it back for comment? I lost track of it. I think I did.
Can I ask Sarah a question?
Right, absolutely.
Sarah, did you hear what was presented earlier about maybe just opening the Parker Tree Trail and then just closing it when work was going to be done? And does that seem like a reasonable request?
Yeah, so in the management team, where we're at in the discussions right now is we're looking at opening up Parker Creek because it's further away from the worst of the bluff instability. And then we're trying to decide the best way to control the public foot traffic, right? Because right now, the foot traffic from visitors, especially as we're getting into warmer weather and summertime, I think one of the management team members said it's like tourism on steroids, right? Ever since 2020, we've seen like this big increase in foot traffic. And so we're trying to come up with a few ideas. We had a proposal that our attorney submitted for us to the management team that is a recommendation for some fencing that would just fence off that unstable bluff area, allow public access to the beach so that, people can still come and they can enjoy their time there, but they can't get up into the actual parts of that toe of the bluff that's coming down, and then to block off the memorial trail as well, so that that entire area is protected until we can figure out the best way forward. So, understand that these are really, and I know you appreciate this, but it is a really complicated issue, and we are working really hard. And we're, our considerations are making sure that the public has access as well as protecting the sacred site itself. And so, we're coming up with those more temporary measures. And I think we're really close to having something to bring forward to the commission, I would assume in the next couple of weeks on that short-term solution. The long-term might take a little bit longer, but, we want to get Parker Creek reopened so that, in time for tourist season and things like that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a comment. I mean, at risk of stating the obvious, there's at least 3 ongoing issues, right? There's the immediate closure due to erosion and, I guess, new threats to safety and cultural resources, right? There's the ongoing threat to the bluffs and other cultural resources due to natural processes, which aren't going to change. And then there's, of course, long-term concerns about how to preserve those cultural resources down there. And I think really tonight we can only address that first issue, right? Like how do we deal with that immediate threat and the immediate lack of access to that beach? And so, you know, we're not going to address that second or third point. I mean, the timeline for those sorts of resolutions are probably closer to a scale measured on decades rather than months at a time. So, locally, I've watched the Trinidad Coastal Land Trust rebuild a trail on a Saturday afternoon. I've watched the California Conservation Corps repair a trail to State Beach in a week. Rebuilding trails can be a fast process. There's obviously some other red tape that I'm probably not considering at the moment, but like actually getting boots on the ground to rebuild trails isn't that onerous of a process. It can happen quite quickly. So, I mean, I guess my question is related back to the timeline of these closures. I mean, it seems to me that if a Saturday afternoon is long enough to rebuild a trail, certainly 2 months is long enough to rebuild a trail. So is there anything that we could do to ensure that these trails are being rebuilt prudently and in the sort of shortest timeline possible? Like, are there conditions of approval that we can add to sort of encourage more quick action?
Well, I mean, I think the time limit is part of that.
I guess just to expand on that, like if we say that the Parker Creek Trail stays closed for 2 months and the Absent Green Trail closes for 6 months, there's still going to be people, walking around signs and walking on those trails anyway. So even if we did agree to extend those months at a time, or perhaps beyond that, like what can we do to help ensure action to repair those trails as rapidly as possible? Or is that something within our scope?
I think, the wording of the condition here is that, these time limits can be extended. But it says, based on the need for more time to obtain funding and our further explore, repair and access alternatives if the Planning Commission finds that substantial progress has been made in the initial time period. So I think that sort of gives, an impetus so that if, there will be a request to extend that time limit, then we have to show that we're making progress on this. And like I said, I think we are. Like Sarah said, I think within the next couple of weeks we're going to have something put together for a proposal for this barrier at the base of the trail or at the base of the bluff. And then, like I said, hoping to bring that to you in May. I mean, so that's May. That's or potentially scheduling a special meeting, because there is, we do have to notice it 2 weeks ahead of that. So, we'd have to have a proposal pretty quick, but that's, realistically, that is what we're looking at for Parker.
Right. I mean, it goes back to my comment from earlier, right? Every day of closure is probably another day of disturbance to more sensitive areas than what's already, allocated to space for the trail. So I would really love to see those trails open as soon as repairs can be done. Like I of course want to ensure that we keeping safety and cultural resources in mind, but I would also like to avoid further damage to cultural resources due to the ongoing closure as well. So if there's any sort of teeth we could use to shorten the timeline and encourage more rapid repairs, I would sort of prefer that approach rather than saying, hey, we can always extend the deadline. Because again, the further we extend the deadline, the more ongoing damage is going to be to some of those irreversible damage to some of those environmental and cultural resources.
Yeah, you're two different, I mean, Axel England Trail, yeah, that's a bigger problem. Parker Creek Trail, that's just moving along. And that could be just, you know, I mean, I'd like to see that. Everybody wants to see that open as soon as possible. If there is a plan going to be coming up real soon, I'm open to, you know, being respectful to try to make something happen. Even if everybody goes around the close signs, nobody's going to stop you. I mean, realistically, there's nobody stopping anybody, and it's not legal, but it's not a problem from a city legally. So anyway, those are just actually the trail is a big deal. I want, you know, that I know that's going to take longer. Park Creek. That could be open real soon. I wouldn't be, if there was going to be a plan, I could see it being closed for a little bit more, but then it needs to be open. I'm going to go there. Right? I think everybody will.
That's not a logical reason to file closure because people are going to go around. That's
no, but
we close the public comment period, so we're trying to deal with this. I understand entirely. This is.
But they're
one of those issues.
trying to cordon off an area, and I can respect that. I understand what she's saying, but yeah, I want to see it done as soon as possible. I mean, next week or whatever. But so anyway, I think I'm just digging myself in a deeper hole here. Quiet.
I guess to follow up a little bit on what Sarah was saying regarding bluff stability, I don't think that pedestrian use of either trail contributes in any significant way to the stability of that bluff. The erosion that we've seen is basically 100% due to the ocean's forces. With regarding trying to put up some kind of, or actually before I get to the fence, with regard to some sort of long-term, this is sort of beyond what we're talking about tonight, but a long-term bluff stability idea, I want to go on the record saying that we should absolutely not even try to think about putting riprap on that bluff down there. I think that would ruin the whole beach. I think it could, I don't know what would happen, but like that just would change the whole, I guess, hydrology. I don't know. The way the sand moves, I mean, the sand could just wash away and the beach could shrink. I don't know what would happen. So I would not like to see that pursued. And then as for like a fence to keep people off of the bluff, I understand the concern of like potential looting or people going up into the bluff and taking or finding cultural resources that may have eroded out of the bank. But I guess personally, I see like a fence on the beach is like just like trash on the beach that is going to get washed away by the next storm that we have. And so it's hard for me to get behind that. Yeah. And I guess then following up on the especially at the bottom of Parker Creek Trail, I mean, I see that more as like fixing that trail is more of a maintenance issue. And I don't see that as like a project per se that is needed to CDP. It seems like something that you could just send as staff member down there and fix it.
Good thing.
I mean, given that that's how everyone else on the coastline, you know, like it's not like the Coastal Land Trust is getting a CDP every time they have a trail.
So honestly, do they have a programmatic CDP that allows regular maintenance. Repair and maintenance can be exempt depending on the situation, but it's limited, and part of it also depends on is someone complaining to the coastal commission about it as well, or whatever. Most of these issues, have come up in management team meetings. I think the coastal commission is not. I mean, they don't get that hard on. And beach, sand supply is certainly part of that equation, and beach access and beach condition long term. In terms of the fencing, that would come to you, but certainly, no one wants plastic. No one wants something that can be an entanglement. Even road was an entanglement hazard or a navigational hazard. My suggestion today was the rotten cotton that they use on the crab pots that disintegrates, basically wooden posts and the rotten cotton. But that, I think that's for. But so these are the things that we're talking about in our management team, because it's a complex issue and it's a tough question, and there are no easy answers. And so, like Sarah said, it's about asking for time to thoughtfully proceed.
I'll make just a couple of comments real fast, and then figure out what I'm going to do. Thank you for all the public comment. I think it was important for us to get a feel for where everyone is. And also very important to hear from you, Sarah, from your perspective. I don't think that there's been many more frustrating subject in Trinidad than trails over the last couple of years, and I certainly understand that. But I kind of do go back to what I've said earlier. I mean, tonight, as Chris has pointed out, we can't solve the long-term problems tonight. We're not going to be able to do that. We don't have the expertise. We need to leave that to the people who really understand how to do that sort of thing. I do appreciate the fact that there's differences in the perceived condition of Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail versus Parker Creek Trail. Thank you very much, Mr. Kinney, for the pictures that gave us some visuals so we can see what's going on down there at Parker Creek. I guess I'm at the point, just based on what I have heard from the two members of the management team tonight, which you and Sarah, that there seems to be a renewed effort to try to get this thing moving. And I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that there seems to be a little bit more participation from the Coastal Commission than there has been in the past. And we certainly know what certainly the main charter of the Coastal Commission is public access to beaches and our shoreline. So having said all of that, I'm of the opinion, and just based on the timeline that we're talking about, that I would support the motion as it is in our packet tonight, which would be to close both trails. Seems very clear to me that Parker Creek can be opened very quickly. We have put a timeline on it to be open by Memorial Day weekend, whatever that Memorial Day. So I'm willing to let the experts, and certainly I don't feel I'm an expert, to proceed with what they need to do for short-term and long-term remedial and long-term repair and rejuvenation of the trails. So I will support the staff recommendation and the motion that's in the package, but certainly if anyone else wants to make a motion other than that, that is acceptable, of course.
I would second that.
If the goal is to have the trail open by Memorial Day, why not include that in the extension here? If I go with 2 months, Memorial Day is only 6 weeks away.
I think it was, the question is whether we can actually make the May planning commission meeting. Which, you know, I would potentially request a special meeting before. Because again, we're talking about a matter of, oh, we can get this done in 2 weeks, but I need to put the notice out in a week and a half. You know, it's that tight of a timeline. It just gives us a little wiggle room if, you know.
The potential project that would be brought before maybe the May meeting. That's just regarding like the fence, temporary fence at the beach primarily.
Yes, and a more permanent temporary barrier at the Axel. It's not the sawhorses, but something that's actually.
I guess I'm just going to double down, but my other concern about, I mean, I know this isn't the project we're doing tonight, but with this fence is, I feel like it's just going to, if anything, attract attention to the sensitive resource. Because I think, as Bryce mentioned, nobody goes down to the beach to go poke around bluffs. I mean, it's already illegal. Maybe some people do, but the fence is not going to stop those people. That's for sure.
True, but I mean, there's people who, you know, go exploring. They, you know, might see something that looks interesting, go exploring, they pick something up without necessarily knowing what it is. You know, it's the kind of thing we're thinking about is the fencing that's used for plover nests, for example. I mean, that could be considered to attract people as well, but I think it, you know, protects the nest more than it doesn't. It's you know, like it's been pointed out, closing trails isn't going to keep everybody off. You know, it's about doing the best we can.
So we have a motion, we have a second, and we've had some discussion. Any further discussion?
I'm encouraged by the dialogue. That's the only reason I'd be willing to agree to this. And yeah, I want to see it open, at least Parker Creek open as soon as possible. And if there's a way to open it sooner, we had a special meeting, I don't care. But that's what I'm encouraged by is the dialogue. And it's not just this trail, it's like the city talking. I'm glad to see that communication is happening where it hasn't for years. So that's why I'm only encouraged this for a short time to hopefully encourage more discussion on bigger pictures, bigger picture items also.
Okay. Any further comments? All in favor of, well, I'm going to read it just to make sure here. I'll read it. Based on application materials and information included in this staff report, and based on public testimony, I find that the project is consistent with the city's certified LCP and other applicable regulations, and I move to adopt the information in this staff report and approve the project as described in the staff report and as conditioned herein with one condition. That is that because the approval is for temporary trail closures, the CDP shall expire after 2 months going into effect for the Parker Creek Trail and after 6 months of going into effect with the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail, unless an extension is granted by the Planning Commission based on the need for more time to obtain funding and or further explore repair and access alternatives if the Planning Commission finds that substantial progress has been made in the initial time period. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Sorry. I was going to ask if we could discuss one more quick point.
Okay.
I know people were voting, but if we're saying that it's consistent with the elements of the LCP, I've got a question about policy 5 of the general plan, which states that existing trails which are creating problems should either be improved or closed. And I think I would point out that the trails aren't creating a problem, right? As it says earlier in the staff report, it was erosion, which is the initial, is initially creating the problem, and these trails are exacerbating existing problems. I'm not sure it's.
I mean, I think, yes, erosion is a natural process. I think it is exacerbated by human activities. Whether that be a trail, I mean, because you're cutting into something that's then, not vegetated, and you got people, scrambling up and down the bluff certainly is, it's not impacting bluff stability, but it certainly causes erosion.
The policy 64, sorry. Here's someplace. General plan requires that the trail system be marked and maintained for use by the public. The question is whether closure constitutes maintenance.
It can. I mean, you maintain roads and close them temporarily.
Chat about this a little bit.
Okay. Motion is on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Okay.
Okay, so we have 2 ayes, 1 opposed, and a abstain. Or nay?
Yeah, sorry, nay.
Oh, nay. So it's 2-2. To help me with the parliamentary procedure.
Motion fails to pass.
Motion fails to pass, but that goes back to my original question. Does that mean that the trails then immediately are open or closed?
Can entertain an alternate motion.
Well, that's true. Thank you. Yeah. Do I hear an alternate motion? Thank you, brother.
I would submit an alternative motion. That's let me flesh out the text of that a little bit. I would just want to, as mentioned earlier, I think that the communication is good, but I would like to see some more material progress. And I'd like to do everything that we can to help ensure that communication and that dialogue remains open. The progress continues to be made. That's sort of my rationale for voting against this. And so if we could somehow accommodate for that, if we could add
Do you want to make that a condition of approval?
right, that we could see some sort of timeline, that we could establish some sort of timeline for meetings or for
What about,
somebody to acknowledge responsibility for building the trail.
I mean, some of that is yet to be worked out in terms of, it's the city's jurisdiction. As we mentioned before, in terms of permitting, the city owns much of the property, not all the Parker Creek Trail. But who actually does the funding and who's the applicant? We don't know that yet. For some of the longer term solutions. And putting a timeline, on meetings, if someone's key person is sick, or I have to cancel a meeting, that could be an issue. I don't know if reporting, like a monthly progress report at each meeting would be helpful.
Honestly, I'd be satisfied by a progress report that says we were unable to meet because of this is I would just want some sort of material evidence that there was some attempt to continue to communicate and some attempt to get these places open as soon as possible.
I'd be happy to provide a monthly report.
Does that satisfy your concern? And can we add that as condition of approval number 2?
Yes, a recurring, no less frequently than monthly reports? I guess no. Yeah, no less frequently.
A monthly report since we meet monthly.
Okay, fair.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that you reopen comment, public comment just briefly? I'd like to help you get us started. If we can speak. 2 minutes.
1 minute. 1 minute.
I remind everyone to speak into the microphones. On the Zoom can't hear you.
Okay. Are we?
I'm not understanding why you guys are not receptive to the idea of telling you have a 5-day closure to do your work. That gives them the incentive to actually get going on the work, and in the meantime, the trail's open. You go to the status quo. The status quo is the trail is open. But you need to do work on the trail. 5 days is plenty of time. It's conditioned on you've got a 5-day closure. Tell us when it starts. We'll close the trail for 5 days, get your work done, and that's that.
Thank you. Close to public comment again.
One person gets.
Okay. I have totally lost control. Again, very quickly, Kevin.
I support Bryce's comments about closing the trail for a set number of days. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
As an attorney, I think you might know something, you might talk to county council, or your council rather.
Would you come to the microphone, please, because we're having a hard time of hearing.
This is Tim Needham, and I'm also an attorney. And one of the problems that you may have is that you presently have Parker Street Trail is part of it is owned by the city, but part of it is a public easement because it has been used more than 5 years under claim of right. If you stop using it over a period of time, it can be considered abandoned. Okay, so you may wish to talk with your own city council, your own attorney. Make sure that what you're doing here doesn't abandon your right to use the trail. Period.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Sarah again from the Cherry Ancestral Society. So the city's attorney is part of these discussions. He's aware of what's going on. He was actually at the Cherry management team meeting today. I think part of the issue, because I'm hearing, communication, and I'm not sure if that's talking about, I'm not sure who's not communicating, but I've heard that brought up a couple times about this starting communications, and I'm not sure starting communications with who, but we have been in regular discussions with city staff, and I think part of the issue is at city council meetings, a lot of this stuff doesn't really get reported out. Which is something that we've been talking about in the Tri management team meetings. And I have volunteered to go to the city council meetings and update about the discussions we're having in the management team meetings in a I think a more comprehensive way than what like the city manager has time for. And part of that is that the city attorney is aware of what's going on. The Coastal Commission has been invited. They're not team members, so they really don't have a regular place at the table, but they are there to help advise on that. And then, the Yurok tribe is there. The Tri Ancestral Society is there, and then city staff is there. So, we have the city manager, city planner, and sometimes Becky is there. So, there's, the geologist is there. We have the city engineer there. There's a lot of people there, and it's not a simple issue. I think it's, saying we can take care of it like on a Saturday afternoon, I think is oversimplifying and not really doing justice to what's going on down there, because it's, there's a lot of experts in the room and nobody is saying that. And, there's a lot of issues going on at the site that we're trying to deal with in, an expedited way. And we understand, that people want it open right now. And, we get that. This is an inconvenience for all of us. But we are working on it. And it's just allowing the team a little bit of time. A 2-month timeline is short. We're not asking for years. We're asking for enough time to get this stuff in, to get a crew on the ground, to get the materials, and to get this project finished. So, we appreciate just having a little bit of patience with us while we try to sort out some complicated issues.
Thank you. So, where we are right now, there has been an alternate motion to add a additional condition of approval. And as I understand it right now, that is for a monthly report. And I would add to that, based on the conversation that we've just had, is that monthly report will be made to the Planning Commission as well as the City Council. That would be useful, particularly in light of what Sarah just said in terms of making sure that we have that communication as broadcasted as best as we can. So that is the alternate motion. I will move for the alternate motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
We have 3 ayes and 1 opposed. Motion carries as amended. Okay. Thank you all for that. It's a tough discussion, I know. About a 2-minute break. Special thanks. Actually.
Humboldt Beach. You don't want to get it on driver's lanes, but the new water. Applications.
Yeah, well, I was just, doesn't seem like it usually warms up. Do you feel warm? Do you feel warm?
It should be getting warmer.
Yeah. It's the worst day. Yeah. The worst round. Yeah.
So I guess it's just us, huh? As soon as
That's it.
Water advisory committee, no, that was the wrong.
This will bring people in the future.
What's that?
Some water.
What stuff could possibly be controversial about that?
Fast.
You were at the trails. Meeting this.
Similar to this.
Okay. That's kind of what I figured.
But the only difference that I heard was, I was claiming that the insurance was basically shutting her down. It sounded like a similar discussion to the other one that was shut down. And I just had the whole church discussion.
Yeah.
I was all set. This is, it really was. But if they're talking, if Trevor's making some kind of, if something's happening.
It's all up to you, Trevor.
That's right.
We're coming to get you.
That's the thing is, it's quite a few people.
Yeah, I know.
It's been positive.
But these would be the people who get stuck with having to write the annual, sorry, the monthly progress report.
That's good. That was good. And they're putting it in the planning commission in there too. That's good. Getting people to talk.
Okay, so let's hit it again.
I will derail this member for the promise.
No derailments. We appreciate it on the tracks. We appreciate comments. We need to be creative. Okay. So next item on the agenda is
Should we wait for him to return?
No, it's still recording.
okay, item 3, water conservation, permitting and landscaping. Trevor?
Yeah, so this is another one of our housing related grant tasks. This one is LEAD. And one of the tasks was to, water is one of the limiting factors for development in Trinidad. And so one of the things, housing element directs the city to look at water conservation actions. And so that was part of this LEAP grant task. So one, looking at the water efficient landscape ordinance, which we talked about introduced in February. And then another part of it though was to look at water use over time. It's something that particularly as we've looked at water use in terms of STRs a couple of times, but also I look at water use as part of the OWTS permits. And so as I look at that data, I see some anomalies in terms of high water users, increased water use. And Trinidad has we don't look at water use as part of the permitting process, yet development under the Coastal Act can be changed in the intensity of water. That doesn't typically mean like someone just using more water for an existing use necessarily. But so that can be development. And the city has no contracts with anyone in terms of how much water they use. So the idea was kind of look at water use and thinking about incorporating it into the permitting process. And I don't necessarily know what that would look like. Again, this is sort of an introductory topic. So we've got two things going on. We've got the landscaping regulations. So in addition to the water efficient landscape ordinance, I also provided some revised regulations for landscaping. So there is a section in the zoning ordinance for landscaping, but it's really screening for certain commercial uses. So, and I added some of the sort of water conservation focused things we've talked about as part of the general plan update in terms of native vegetation, water efficient irrigation systems and things like that. So that's So that's something specific we can talk about. And then in terms of more of an introduction to, looking at water use and kind of monitoring it and or regulating it, I provided you some water data, a variety of water data, because it is interesting to see that, over time, water use overall is down. So that's good. The city has done some water conservation efforts, kind of starting with the 2016 drought, probably. The state mandated some certain actions, and then the city started looking at flows on Humboldt more closely. The Planning Commission developed some policies for hooking up users outside the city limits, and that was never finalized. But we did develop a water shortage contingency plan, so sort of looking at water conservation measures as water availability goes down during a drought. So, that might be part of the reason for the reduction of water, is that's a little bit more on people's mind. So, I just categorized some of the data overall, and if anybody wants to see something in particular, more specific about certain data types, I can certainly provide that. So these are fairly general, by kind of use sort of citywide, as well as by sort of zone or use. So the biggest users are in the UR zone. The commercial zone is the other one. And then, so this is also about individual water use. Overall water use is down, but there are, some users that use a lot more than others. And is that really, are they taking away water that could be used by someone else? And then, looking at water increase over time. So there's the last three graphs are sort of individual users. It's not that it's not necessarily public information, but I didn't want to call anybody out individually, so I didn't identify who those are here. But so just again, it's an introduction, and then I provided you some examples of what other communities do. So there's not a lot of examples of sort of regulating individual water use or allocating water use outside of droughts, but there are some water limited communities. I think that seems to be something that is starting to be seen a little bit more. So I just provided some examples. You can see, Monterey Peninsula has very limited amount of water. So I'm not recommending that we need something this detailed in terms of people, how many faucets do you have in your house? But like I said, it's just an example of kind of some of the things that you might see out there. And then these sort of allocation programs seem to be a little bit more common, where you set sort of a standard amount. So, so you could do it based on, someone fills out a questionnaire about their household and you base it on that, or you just assume a certain amount for all residences and kind of give them that allocation. I think, particularly for commercial uses, it would make sense to look at water use in terms of the design of septic system. But that's a good point. So like I said, I just wanted to introduce this idea, answer questions from the Planning Commission. If you want more information about certain things, I can get that for you. Giving me some, I didn't want to dive too deep into it without getting a little bit more direction from the Planning Commission in terms of where you want to go with this. This is something that we're going to need to talk with the public works staff, as well as the city engineering staff, city council. That's a big, it's depending on where the Planning Commission wants to go. It's a big deal. deal. So, so I see this as just sort of a starting point and getting some input or requests for additional information. And then, you know, specific comments certainly on the landscaping ordinance or regulations. And so one of Aaron's comments was to make sure that irrigation that's gray water or rainwater catchment subject to some.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments from commissioners or staff?
Thanks for putting all these graphs together. It's a good breakdown.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, you got your colors on it. That's the top 5 users. Are those commercial accounts or is it mixed residential?
So the top graph is the top 5 users in 2022 in the UR zone over the last 10 years. The second one is the top 5 users for 2022 in the C, PD, and VS zone. So that's the commercial users.
Oh, I see.
Now, do keep in mind that all of Trinity Street is PD, so some of those are single-family residences. They're not all commercial uses. The VS zones are basically the RV parks. And then the last one is the accounts with the biggest gains in those commercial zones over the 10 years. And the red, yellow, and gray lines are the same users here.
Additional comments, questions?
Are they aware of their usage? I mean, I know they get their bill, but are you telling them that you're tracking them?
No. I mean, so in people who have an OWTS permit, I do, you know, for residences, there's sort of you get a plus or a minus if you have higher low water use. So, and STRs are tracked specifically, but I don't specifically say, you know, there was one instance where there's been a couple of them where, you know, it was above the design flow of the septic system. Now it might be partially landscaping, but I certainly pointed that out on the WTS permit. You know, one was a leak that's been brought under control. The commercial ones, yes. So in terms of, I haven't done a whole lot of commercial permits, and I don't always know the design flow of the septic system. Some are older than that. But when I do, like one of these that's increased their use, they basically doubled their use over 10 years. And that's double the design flow of their septic system. So yes, I just issued an OWTS permit, and I said, put some conditions on it in terms of reducing water use and making sure the system is maintained. Further restrictions.
That was the blue line, the top on the top graph.
No, actually, I think that is probably the yellow line on the bottom one.
Gotcha.
Familiar with Arcadis, what they're doing for their landscaping? See that where I could share it with you. Like water is all directed to, and they to a hole with rocks, and they have a little cross section of how to make a little wetland area, kind of. And it's based off of others also, but it's basically showing people good practices, and which to me is a good way of kind of marketing good ways of doing it. And and then we get to decide if it has to be that way or not. But, and the website's being kind of revamped and, so would you be open to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think the planning commission can consider anything from public education at this point. I mean, with water, with the fact that water use is down overall, maybe that's all that's needed. Just gotta monitor this at this point. And or maybe, and then the next tier maybe kind of certain individuals, if they meet certain criteria, you kind of take a closer look, or maybe start to knuckle down on them somehow a little bit. Versus whole blown allocation. So, yeah, no, I think education is a big part of this. I think it ties in with the city's updating its website. We're going to be doing frequently asked questions, and we have a REAP grant, which is the regional version of the LEAP, to work on our application forms and do some frequently asked questions and get that on the website, and integrating like stormwater permits, so that people are thinking about these things. I think most people don't even think about asking the city for a permit. It's kind of
where to dump stuff.
where to
Go in the septic tank and what can't go in the septic tank.
So and Jennifer has been, with her septic Sue program, is going to, last fall it was really focused on the septic, and then this next summer she's going to add in more of the water wise portion of Septic Smart Water Wise, and do some water. Well, Septic Sue is Septic Smart Water Wise.
She wears many hats.
Tahoe's going to do this too. It really, North Shore Tahoe, to be able to do the development that's being planned. I'm surprised to hear advertising and things to say just that, how to be smarter with water.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways, and there's ways for the city to incentivize conservation. The city is going to be doing a water rate study coming up, I think, in the next year. And so, looking at some sort of tiered water rate structure that encourages conservation is certainly one thing that could be done. The city could get grants to give people water efficient fixtures, subsidize the cost of some of those things. So incentives are also part of it.
I think incentives are nice, but also I feel like context and where appropriate, change is nice, right? Like it's like that's one of the nice things about getting your PG&E bill, right? Is that they tell you, how your electricity usage varies day to day, how it compared to the previous year, how it compares to your community. I think that information like that would be pretty useful. I know, holy crap, I'm using twice as much water as my neighbor is, and twice as much as I used last August. That's pretty powerful. The same way that driving past one of those speed limits, like automated speed limits, trailers is. So I think that's just providing some context and maybe a little bit of self-induced shame is sort of nice because it helps incentivize vision.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think that's always interesting data to know what your neighbors are doing, Yeah, I would support that. That's something the city can easily that they track and put on the bills. So. I mean, it is encouraging that overall water usage is down. I guess one of my thoughts was I was sort of, I guess, initially opposed to the allocation of water to and sort of let people, they have been doing. Like during times of drought, it'd be nice if we had some team actually get out. Should we? Because when we have plenty of water, it's sort of like, oh, yeah. But when we don't, it's could be a big issue, public safety and fire protection.
I think, oh, sorry.
What we found down south that charging board doesn't stop the problem.
That's true. That is
For,
true.
for some people, it does, some people it doesn't. Yeah.
That's true.
I was going to say, we did a little bit of that in the drought or water shortage contingency plan. So, Trinidad's a little bit different because most communities have some sort of reservoir or storage, so it's based on the lake level or something. Where, for Trinidad, it's more day to day. We don't really have the storage. So it's how much water is coming down the creek, but we can't conserve early in the season to save it for later. So it's kind of the problem. But yeah, and I forget exactly the structure in that plan, but I think it requires people to cut back like a certain percent depending on what stage you're at. And, I think stage 1 and maybe 2 is voluntary, and then you do start to get some penalties later on. But I think one of the questions even when we were developing that was, well, do you cut back by 1%? Or do you, because, people who are already conserving water and don't use much, then penalized because they have to cut back even more. And then people who've been using outrageous amounts of water still are using outrageous amounts. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So going back to your OWTS design flow criteria, excuse me. If we looked, so our database right now should pretty much cover every OWTS system in the city, right?
I think we have about 55%.
So we still at around half of them.
Well, the 55% is who has current permits, and then we have some people who have submitted information that.
So my question was, if we looked at the design flows for all the septic systems and we added them all up, could we meet those water requirements?
Like just how much total water is going through the system?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a little bit difficult because, well, for one, residential, the average residential use is what? 116 gallons a day. But the design flow for the septic system is 150 gallons per day per bedroom. So for residents, that might not be the best measure because, no one's using that amount of water. You shouldn't be using that amount of water. They over-design the septic system. But for the commercial users, I think it might be a good target.
I guess my point is, what I was trying to get to is it would be interesting to understand just how draconian we have to be. And what I mean by that is when you look at some of the requirements from some other cities, that's horrible. But others, are not so bad. I'm trying to figure out how I get somewhere, to make it practical for us. And yes, we have the Trinidad water shortage contingency plan, and that pretty much spells out what you have to do during a drought or a water shortage, and I like that. I was just trying to figure out where we needed to be.
Yeah, and I think the other disadvantage of using septic as a kind of your target is that there's so many we just don't have.
Well, that was a little disappointing. Yeah.
They predate that. But I think one of the other things another exercise that has got me thinking about this more was the water demand assessment. So 2018, 2019, GHD did a bunch of studies, and then I did the water demand assessment. And I think there should be, even in, droughts. Now climate change is going to change patterns that we don't fully understand. But for within the city, we should have enough water for growth within the city, plus some second units. And I provided a link, I think, to that water demand assessment. But one of the things is the number, all the new state regulations that come on. I think the city may need to annex at some point to survive. I don't know that for sure, but I mean, it's already difficult enough to find people to serve in the planning. For one, and then, tax base is another. But to annex, you have to have water.
Yeah. Another random thought too was, I think moving forward wherever we go, I really would like to tie in the Water Advisory Committee, because those are the folks that are closer to a lot of the issues than we are. And, I think what we probably would be a benefit is, I realize we're still in the preliminary stages, but at some point to think about the joint planning commission and WAC meetings. Aaron's our rep, so he could certainly facilitate that and help us understand from a policy standpoint where those folks want to go.
That's a good idea.
I think that would be useful. Any other general comments for staff?
Are there any agricultural users in Trinidad city limits?
I mean, other than the community garden. And there's no ag zone properties in the city or in the city's service area.
As far as we know, there's nobody growing anything and selling that stuff for profits. Officially.
Other comments? I'll open it up to public for public comment. Jean and Lee. Okay. Bring back to the commission. Do you want us to go through the modified landscaping requirements tonight?
I mean, it's getting late. It's up to you. I mean, it's so we have until August to work on this before the grant runs out. We might run out of money before that, but yeah, we can just get as far as we can. So
certainly. Okay.
So yeah, if you're up for that tonight, sure.
Why don't we, rather than go through it line by line, if anybody has any comments that they would like to provide, we'll pass back to you. I just have one comment, basically, and that is I'm kind of concerned, or I don't understand how we are going to do already existing landscaping. I mean, do we have to have a grandfather clause? How is this going to work? And
I think it's modified land. I mean, I think it's new and modified landscaping. It's more about how big of an area do you want to just doing front bed.
Yeah.
Where does that start?
Yeah, and that leads me to the other comments along the same line here is that if someone has grandfathered in landscaping and they replace it with something that is onerous, is that in violation of the ordinance, or are they just replacing what's already there?
No, well, I think you could apply it to new and replacement landscaping. I mean, potentially you could, because again, there are half a dozen at least or so residential users that it's a crazy amount of water, and I assume it's landscaping, and they're all right on the bluff. We do want to try and get them to scale that. I don't know.
Well, I know you cover a little bit in terms of the surface area. I get that. More or less looking at individual plants they may replace, but are, invasive. But they're replacing the same species as that died off or whatever, but still it's not what we want.
Well, and technically, under the Coastal Act, if you're within the rural area, much of the city, if you're within, 300 feet of a block or whatever it is, you probably should have gotten coastal development permits for landscaping. Or never done it. I guess the question is what is repair and maintenance? What is new landscaping? I think you said an area on that. So if you're, maybe 100 square feet, 500 square feet. So if you're replacing one bush, but if you're replacing a 100-foot bed.
No, I completely understand that. I just was trying to, maybe I'm digging too deep right now until we actually see what's going on.
But I think you could say no new invasive species.
Yeah, well,
you can say that.
That's clear.
Yeah.
I guess.
So even if they're replacing one bush, that's an invasive species that can't visit with another.
Okay.
How you regulate that?
Well, it is late, and you asked for direction, but I kind of feel I don't feel that we necessarily need to go, and I'm certainly willing. I want to hear what you guys have to say. My comment would be that I don't think we need to be quite as strict as some of the policies that you've shown here. I like what we have in place now with the water shortage contingency plan. I think that goes a long way towards solving problems, but helping us get through them. I'd really like to see the Water Advisory Committee make more input to this process. And my feeling is I like to kind of be in the middle, maybe, of where the policies that you've shown us are. So that's kind of where I'm at.
You'll have to forgive me. I didn't prepare myself with this agenda item very well this evening, but generally speaking, yeah, I think we could be less strict. Richard's request and with regard to the well up. And in terms of somewhere in here, with regards to regulating people's usage and stuff, I think having more input before we sort of decide what direction. Especially if we have.
Did the Water Advisory Committee recently?
I think it was January.
So they're doing for a meeting.
Well, they toured the water plant not too long ago. So was that a meeting? No.
February 23rd.
February, okay.
So maybe plan for a May, see if we can put this on their May, if they're gonna meet in May.
Yeah, I'd really like to make sure that committee weighs in on this.
Yeah, I mean, again, I also want to hear from the engineer. They've been managing the water system for a long time. Public Works has been a lot of turnover recently, but that's another group.
The Water Advisory Committee well, somebody's got to know, like, our software or tracking type stuff goes. Like, I don't know exactly how the water bills get paid, but it's just somebody punching numbers into a spreadsheet and things.
Let's see, I talked to Gabe a little bit about it's old software, but it does have some capabilities. I did talk to Gabe a little bit about that during the discussions on the water shortage contingency plan. Like, can you identify people who are over, more than 25% of or 10, I think you can do some of that in terms of flagging people that a certain threshold.
I guess, like, should we be, or whoever is making decisions, be mindful of the constraints imposed by software, or is it possible that software gets upgraded as part of this whole thing?
Yeah, I don't know.
The 21st century.
And this is the DOS basis.
It seems to me like one step of those grabbing your bill.
Okay. Any other comments that we would like to pass back to Trevor?
I've been looking for a storage tank, of like 500-gallon storage tank that looks good, maybe kind of along the lines of the old storage tanks, what they used to look like, or something that people can put right there by your gutter and then capture water and then use it, or just leave the hose open and then it just runs through to a tank. But I've been looking for this and I haven't seen it. And so I'm just kind of throwing it out there that we've talked about it in the water stuff for a long time. And something that looks good that we could make easy for people. And then once one person sees it, I think more people would start to do it. So anyway, I'm just kind of throwing it out. That's what.
Yeah.
It's a permaculture.
Yeah, and we've definitely talked about that. There is the city has some money in its leftover money in the storm water grant, and we'll be doing some rainwater catchment. So there will be some larger tanks at the school for their garden. 5,000 gallon tank. And the city's also going to get some rain barrels to maybe for town hall, maybe for the city manager's office. Yeah, it might be interesting to sort of see. They're probably looking at what the options are, and it might be interesting to sort of see what those look like.
Anything else?
There was 6 bullet points, questions for us. I feel like we addressed those for you. Page 4, page 49. That packet page 52.
Well, not necessarily, but I think maybe we're not there yet. But if there's any, like, again, if there's some additional information you want, or, is there a different breakdown of water use you want to see, or, some other kinds of programs. So if there's some information data requests, that's.
Yeah, and continuing with the bullets on the next page is, again, real quick, the design flow, we've already answered that. Personally, I think we have to use that the program has to apply to all connections. No reason whatsoever that people outside the city limits can just use willy-nilly amount of water that they want.
And I have seen ordinances that apply.
Yeah, it just makes sense to do that.
So yeah, that is. Yeah.
And again, the grandfather issue, not related to landscaping, but it's a grandfather issue here too, in my mind. So still things to do there.
If someone's grandfather, doesn't that disincentivize conservation?
I'm sorry.
If someone's grandfathered into some water usage, doesn't that disincentivize conservation?
Well, that's what we need to figure out. Yeah, right.
So turning on your taps now so that you get
Exactly.
grandfathered.
Are any of the, off the top of your head, are any of the big, quote unquote, the big users, however you find that, outside of the city limits? Or it's pretty much just.
There are some big users outside city. Yes, there are a couple of properties I've noticed outside city limits, but I don't look at that data as closely. So that's been much more sporadic. So I haven't looked at that as closely.
Gotcha.
And I don't think of all this data that I have since 2013, I don't think I have outside city limits for all those years. I might have more like 5 years.
Make a comment on second page 52, the draft speaking regulations. For part C, I was wondering to what extent we actually want to incentivize fertilizing. Like obviously we want good healthy plants and whatnot, but also some runoff or
So under screening or
under screening, but just generally speaking, I think we have to be careful about incentivizing for demanding. Considering the risks that poses to runoff. That's an issue now.
and so that's existing language, but it could be responsible fertilizing or something. I mean, we could certainly amend the language.
Yeah, sorry. The idea there is just to allow people to fertilize, I guess, right?
Well, that they, for required landscaping, they're supposed to maintain it as.
Vigorously.
Yes.
Competition.
Yeah.
We're moving aggressively, especially in organic fertilizers. It's in the language.
Any other comments? Okay, moving on to our next agenda item, commissioner reports. Does anyone have any?
We have a trail meeting. Went somewhere we were speaking. Who's reporting that? New stuff. It came out in this meeting. Besides this report.
Anything else from any of the other commissioners? Second report, Trevor.
See, I think, I'm focused on the SB2 and LEAP grant tasks because those have the most pressing deadlines. I've still been meeting regularly with coastal commission staff on kind of the ADU ordinance and admin permit allowances. We haven't gotten anywhere in terms of streamlining septic system approvals for, there's enough periods, which is, I think within appealable areas, that's difficult to do in most of the cities. So that's kind of and then this the erosion and on the bluff. So May and the OWTS program. Get everybody operated in these programs. So those are kind of my.
Thank you. Any changes, any comments on the future agenda items?
Is it appropriate to request that progress report from the drawing management team?
Oh, it's a future agenda item?
Yeah. Right.
Sure. I mean, we made it a condition, so yeah, absolutely. I also had a question too, Trevor, on the signage master plan. And I guess it's in the context of the city council authorized these new signs for the dog ordinances. And it isn't, I guess I'm confused as to how that got approved. Okay.
I didn't know they did that. Okay,
I'm sorry.
The city manager said that they could just post them.
not sure that's so, it depends on where they're being posted.
That is true.
I think one's like down on the beach.
Well, I guess my point is that for this agenda item, or the future agenda item, I think the city needs to be aware that this is a very, very sensitive issue. And I am absolutely blown away that, let's say, I just think that there has to be some additional consideration to that plan.
Yeah, I mean, we know how difficult signs have been. I mean, and you can't put a post in the ground without.
Yeah, and I would have it anticipated that,
50?
50.
What?
50.
Are you kidding me?
No.
They're not all posted yet, and I think that many of them will not be posted, but that's how many were ordered.
So I'm suggesting that to keep the city from, getting into hot water, that maybe we should take a look at
You
that.
can't put a 4x post with an arrow in the ground, or you can put a 50. Okay.
They seem to be affixed to existing 4x4 posts.
Okay.
That is true. Yeah. But still.
And then. Well, I mean, clearly the attitude about signs has changed. I mean, 10 years ago, you would never have gotten a stop sign there.
It's true.
Never.
It's true.
That was a huge aesthetic visual. No way.
A word to the wise, I guess that's all I'm saying. Just was a little surprised. Any other comments on?
I was wondering if we wanted to jump into the single-use plastic issue,
But wait,
the restaurants.
oh, like food containers, to-go containers?
Yeah.
That might be more of a city council issue in terms of writing regulations for that. It's not really a land use issue. But I mean, it's certainly, recommend that they.
Just curious, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably more of a.
Is it?
Sounds good. Let them deal with it.
Any other final comments?
What our previous agenda items was to, assign planning commissioners to various city committees. I was wondering if those ever went before the council got ratified.
In January, we had that discussion. And you have been appointed to the Trails Committee. Aaron is appointed to the WAC.
The only functional change, I think, was that I was just the area committee.
Exactly.
That's ever made official by the council. And I guess I could just look at the minutes.
Yeah.
It's me now that we're staring at the agenda. It's previously on the agenda.
Anything else? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.